and you're very welcome to Retina 2020, our Patient Engagement Day. And as Laura said earlier, we're delighted that we're able to host the Patient Engagement Day this year, despite all the challenges that we're living with at the moment. We considered all the options in relation to our Patient Engagement Day, and we felt that it was imperative that we ensure that we retain the day in the calendar. So thank you to everyone who has registered. We have over 300 registrations for today, and we did have a very successful Science Day yesterday, and we had over 470 people register for the Science Day. So the momentum that was created yesterday and what we hope to achieve today in our meeting, I think will help guide a very strong path for fighting blindness as a representative organisation for all the people in the community that we are here to serve. Firstly, I just want to express our sincere appreciation to our sponsors, because without the sponsors, we wouldn't be able to make this happen. And in particular, I want to thank Novartis for their unstilting support for many, many years for this conference. And we wish to thank them sincerely for being the headline support this year yet again. So we thank Novartis for that. In terms of what we want to achieve today, we want to talk in compelling terms because we live in a compelling world at the moment. And what we have for you today is a variety of compelling stories, life stories that people are sharing with us, and that takes great courage for them to share those life stories. We have compelling information and evidence from our presenters, both from the science world and from the world of advocacy and patient information. Also, we have the support services that we provide, and in particular, a flavour of how we have adapted to the new environment that we're living in. And we will hear from Peter, our Insight Counselling Manager, in relation to that. And then also, we will have a compelling challenge, because we are very fortunate that we're living in a time where treatments and therapies are increasingly becoming available. However, there is always the challenge of trying to get those services and those treatments and therapies funded. And we do have that challenge in relation to Luxturna. And later on in the afternoon, we'll be bringing you up to date with regard to where we are in terms of Luxturna, but also, I think more importantly, how we can use our collective voice to try and influence the state and influence the government, our local politicians, and create public awareness and understanding of the importance of gene therapies being reimbursed in Ireland. So outside of that, I want to particularly express my thanks to Fighting Blindness executive staff, particularly our research department, who took the lead in as they always have done in terms of Retina, but particularly to all staff, because they have been very adaptable and very flexible in terms of the challenges that the pandemic has presented us with. Thankfully, we're all keeping safe and healthy, and we sincerely hope that you are yourselves. And whilst today is not what we would like it to be in terms of interacting with yourselves, we are delighted that we're able to host the conference, and also to host it in a way that protects your safety and health and security. So sincere thanks to everyone who has registered. So without further ado, I think it's important now to get the show on the road. And in terms of our first message of support, Evie, Baxter and Victoria Smurfit, who were at our event last year, and Evie received the Paddy Byrne Empowerment Award. And they unfortunately couldn't travel this year for the obvious reasons, but they were very keen that they would give the event a strong message of support. So Laura is going to now give us the link to the next piece of the presentation, which is that message of support from Evie Baxter and Victoria Smurfit, excellent ambassadors for fighting blindness and great supporters of everything that we do.
Hi everyone, I'm Evie Baxter and this is my mom,
Victoria Smurfit, and we wanted to just leave you a note saying Happy Patient Engagement Day, and we wish we were there. Why are we not there?
Corona.
and lockdown that we're all fully aware of. We just wanted to be able to say hi, and not only do we wish we were there, but we're just so proud of the work that Fighting Blindness does, to be able to keep at the center of the work family and focusing on the person and keeping that at the core of their work. Because last year was incredible, wasn't it?
Last year was amazing. That experience was so positive and personal for me.
So fingers crossed, we all get to be together again next year. Now, in the meantime, I know that we all want to come together and band together as a collective voice. You've got a voice.
I do have a voice.
It's a very loud voice.
I use it quite often.
But if we all come together, then we can help Fighting Blindness with all their incredible hard work that they're doing, trying to get Luxturna reimbursement program going. Because if we get one gene therapy over the line, please God, we get them all, because there's it would be lovely to be at the forefront of change and positive growth for everybody in the community. Most of whom we met a lot of the community, didn't we?
We did.
And how about 2021? Will we get to meet them then?
Fingers crossed.
Magic Ball says yes. Take care, have a wonderful day. We miss you all. Stay safe. From London.
Bye.
Bye.
A big thank you to Evie and Victoria for that message of support. And I do think that Evie was very engaging last year in the conference, and certainly did great work in terms of raising awareness of the needs and the work of Fighting Blindness when she did her appearance on the Late Late Show. So again, big thank you to Evie and Victoria for that message of support. The next introduction I want to make is to an individual who has international sports achievement, but also has had significant challenges in terms of reaching that level of sports achievement. In 2011, he had played 6 times for Leinster Rugby, and then something happened that changed the course of his journey in life. And what Ian McKinley, international rugby star, wants to do is share his thoughts on that journey and how those challenges have been overcome, and how he went on to do great and wonderful things as an international rugby player as well for Italy. So a big welcome to Ian, and we appreciate the time he's given in preparing his presentation for us. Thanks very much.
My name is Ian McKinley, and I am a visually impaired professional rugby player. And you might ask, how does that work? Well, when I was a kid, I always had a dream of playing international rugby. I had the ball in my hands in the garden, singing the national anthem, always wanting to play against England and beat England at home. So much so that I was playing rugby in school, and my career development was good enough that I was fortunate enough to get into the Leinster Academy. So playing with other players such as Brian O'Driscoll and Jack McGrath and all these players that have gone on to play for the British and Irish Lions. So my career path was definitely going in the right direction, playing for the Irish under-20s and various other Leinster representative teams. But my life changed and took a sudden and dramatic turn in 2010 when I was playing for my university, so UCD. And I remember just literally a couple of minutes into the game, I was wrestling for possession of the ball, went for one big rip, landed on my back, and in that split second, unfortunately, a little piece of metal in the form of a stud came into contact with my face, and more specifically my eye, and my eyeball unfortunately burst. So obviously there was a pretty serious reaction from my part. My vision completely went straight away. I actually thought it was a deliberate act, but I was rushed away to hospital where I had emergency surgery in the Royal Eye and Ear in Dublin. Thankfully, they were able to save my eye, but they did tell me that I needed a year of no activity, which is pretty difficult for me because that is the thing that I love to do the most. But I gradually got back vision, about 50 60%, which enabled me to go back onto the rugby field and play under Joe Schmidt in his first year with Leinster. But as the year went on, further complications arose in the form of cataracts, and unfortunately in 2011 my retina in my left eye fully detached, which left me permanently blind, which was an absolutely devastating blow for myself and my family around me, because they knew from when I was this little kid with a ball in my hand, that is all I wanted to do. Wanted to represent Ireland, wanted to make my country proud and my family and my friends proud. So my dream was dashed, almost nowhere to turn. At the age of 21, what do you do? Do I go to university again? Do I keep chucking away at that? Do I look for a job? Do I play another sport? I was involved in Gaelic football for many years. Do I maybe look at that? It is physical, but maybe less physical than rugby. Or do I move country? So I was fortunate enough that Leinster helped me, and actually I got a call from Italy to say, would you like to come and coach? And I went there and coached a newly found club where I was dealing with people from the age of 4 to 40. So it was a fantastic experience to learn a different language and learn how Italy does things maybe a bit differently to Ireland. But there was always this little mental battle going on in my mind. There was this little thing that just right in the back here that just wouldn't go away. And that was, you retired so young, you can still play. But I didn't want to risk the sight in my eye, because unfortunately I was gouged a couple of times on my return. So I thought, what can I do? And I remember breaking down in the arms of my brother, crying, saying, all I want to do is play rugby again. So with this bit of motivation, he became a very important person to me. And subsequently, we spoke with World Rugby. And in 2014, rugby eye protection became available for all different types of athletes. So whether you were young or old, rugby goggles became available, and I grabbed the very, very first pair of rugby goggles and stepped back onto the rugby field 3 years after my last game with Leinster. There I was playing against people maybe not in fantastic shape, because it was the lowest level of Italian rugby, but I didn't care. Subsequently, fast forward, I knew then this was the right thing to do. Physically, mentally, everything was going well for me, and I climbed the Italian ladder, so much so I got signed by a team called Benetton Treviso, who are based in a little city 30 minutes north of Venice. Not a bad place to live whatsoever. And then my dream that I had as a kid was slightly altered, but that dream was realized, of running out, singing a national anthem, playing in front of a packed stadium, making people proud, was realized in 2017 when I managed to represent Italy, because there is a rule: if you do not play for a senior international team, if you have played there for 3 years, you automatically are available for that nation. So I played against Fiji and became the first ever goggle-wearing player to play at international level and to play for my newfound nation. So vision for me is obviously very important, and it is a very delicate topic for a lot of people. And I know, as we are at the moment, there are 240,000 people in Ireland that have either visual impairments or registered blind, which is an astronomical number. So for me, this conference that is going on, the work that Fighting Blindness do, is so important. And the messages I receive weekly, every second week, from people saying that they have a similar issue, or they know someone, their son, their daughter, their mother, their father have a similar issue. And say, for example, the rugby goggles have helped them to participate not only in sport, but participate in rugby, for me has been the biggest mountain to climb, and the biggest joy that it has given me. So the Fighting Blindness team, what they continue to do, even these Retina conferences, general conferences for eye care, is so important. So I hope my story today will give a little insight into what I've gone through in the last 10 years. I hope it inspires. and I hope it inspires people to never accept no for an answer, that you, particularly in the times that we are going through now, you continue fighting, you continue staying positive, and you make sure that you've got a great group of people around you to help you through these difficult times. So enjoy the rest of the conference, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian, for that really warm and empowering message and sharing his experience. And it's so good just to hear from personal stories of triumph over adversity and fighting blindness. We do what we can. We may not be great here on the Zoom webinar function, but we do our research and our support, cure, empower mission much better than I'm managing this webinar function. But bear with me. So our first session of today is going to be delivered by our very own Peter O'Toole, Head of Support and Counselling. And he is going to discuss the importance of staying connected and our support resource throughout COVID-19. So again, just bear with me while I try and share a lovely warm little piece from Peter for you now.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Peter O'Toole. I'm the Head of Support and Counselling with Fighting Blindness. I'm here today to talk to you for 20-25 minutes about the support service itself, and specifically how we've adapted that service over the last 7 or 8 months as well. So back on March the 12th this year, myself and the team found ourselves, along with everybody here today, in pretty much uncharted territory with the arrival of COVID-19. So we all quickly had to adapt to working from home after closing the office in Ely Place in Dublin. Our counselling service, which most of you will be familiar with, had been traditionally delivered on a face-to-face basis in the office in Dublin, and also in the border counties through our Need to Talk project. A lot of people would already have availed of counselling by telephone, but we immediately worked to transfer the service entirely to phone-based services. And by and large, that's proved to be a real success. We've been busier than ever before, and a lot of people reaching out looking for that extra emotional support, which we're able to offer by telephone, and in the hope of a possible and eventual return to face-to-face in Dublin and in the border counties. One particular concern we did have was regarding our members and our service users, and how to keep people connected with their peers and the friends they'd made through Fighting Blindness over the previous years and months. We already had a number of support groups and special interest groups, the majority of those being based in Dublin, in Ely Place, with a few also being run in Cork. Suddenly then, these options for people to regularly link in with others, to learn new skills, have a chat, be supported by their peers, that all of a sudden appeared to be pretty much a lost option for us. So what we decided to do is to take some positive action, come up with a solution, and we started looking at using Zoom. So I think like most of you here and the rest of the world, none of us had a huge amount of experience with Zoom, which is similar to most of the people we were engaging with. So we knuckled down, we learned as much as we could about it, we bought the licenses, and we started initially running our technology exchange club on Saturdays, on Mondays on Zoom. So that would be our groups of people who come together to learn about technology, assistive technology, how to use your smartphones, and so on and so forth. That was a pretty regular group, so we started with them. We then followed through with the peer support groups, including our newest group for partners, and then we followed up with the mindfulness sessions. So one of the major challenges that we were facing was not to just jump onto a new way of doing things and expect all of our group members and clients and service users to just fall in line with us. So what we started to do was we offered individual and group training on Zoom to get people comfortable with using the system. And we didn't want anybody to shy away from something they'd previously enjoyed or close off those groups to people who might be new to them because they weren't comfortable with using Zoom or they hadn't got that experience. So far we've provided the training to over 250 people, And pretty much the final result took us all by surprise. So in addition to the regular group staying together, we actually saw a huge increase in people reaching out to us, not just from Dublin, but from all over the country. So some of the groups have seen an increase of up to 400%. And if we're going to be honest, the success has brought its own challenges in managing such a large increase, but we are really, really lucky to have a great team with us, and we have some exceptionally dedicated volunteers who I'd like to express our gratitude to now that we couldn't do without them and we couldn't run the groups without them, so that's always very much appreciated. So as more people linked in with us and we got an overall picture of how isolation and a lack of connection was impacting the community, we started to add a number of new services to responsibly meet those needs. We started our weekly coffee mornings, a Border Counties peer group, 2 new peer support services, one for young adults and one for parents. And a recent development is the moving of our face-to-face Living with Sight Loss course onto virtual delivery through Zoom, which has provided opportunities for learning and peer interaction to people from all over the country, and not just the border counties where we originated it from in the first place. So a lot of different services going on, from counselling to peer support, technology, mindfulness, living with sight loss. But that's just the practical side of things. So in order to kind of get the opinions and the insights gained from the people who've actually used the services, I'd like to maybe take some time now to talk to a few of the people around the country who've been interacting with us over the last few months. Some of them for the very first time, and some of them who've been with us for years as well. So if you just bear with me, I'll invite all the guys in, introduce them, and we can have a chat about what's been going on for them over the last 7 months. Hello everyone, how are you?
Hey, how's it going?
How are you?
So glad we got you all in without a glitch. So good morning to everybody. To Marion, Helena, Jackie, and Connor, and thanks very much for sharing your time with us today. Maybe just work around and get you just to briefly introduce yourselves as well. Who you are, where you're from, your current situation. Maybe start with yourself, Marion.
Oh, thank you, Peter. You're so kind. Good morning, everybody. My name is Marion Maloney, and I live here in the beautiful west of Ireland in Galway City. And I've been visually impaired all my life, would have been involved with RP Ireland fighting blindness back in the day, the very, very early days of fighting blindness. Wasn't a cane user, a guide dog owner back in those days, but did my long cane mobility in 2000 and went on to get my first guide dog in 2009 and have my second guide dog now. So quite a difference in being a cane user and being a guide dog owner. We don't have the time to go into that today, but yeah, I'm quite happy with my guide dog, and he makes me get out for a walk. So that's me.
Thanks very much, Marion. Connor, maybe if I could just jump to yourself. Hi, thanks for joining us.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is Connor Lennon. I'm living out in Cullen in County Louth. Unlike yourself, I'm very new to sight loss. I was declared blind just in June of the summer just gone by, so just during the whole COVID lockdown kind of stuff. Since then, I've just been kind of training. I'm training at the moment with long cane, and I'm just getting back to doing what I can do.
Great, Connor. Thanks very much. Jackie, hi.
Hi, good morning, Peter. I'm Jackie. I'm from Sligo, originally Donegal. I lost my sight over 25 years ago, but I've been recently diagnosed with RP. I'm working a second dog, called Rum. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Jackie. And Helena, last but definitely not least, hiya.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name's Helena. I'm from Leitrim originally, but living in Dublin the last 5 or 6 years now, maybe. Doesn't seem that long, but it is. And I have RP. I was diagnosed about 10 years ago, so I'm 23 now. And I've been involved with fighting blindness pretty much since I've been in Dublin, so the last 5 or 6 years.
Thanks very much for joining us. I suppose the easiest way for me to work around the different services and get all of your inputs is to maybe, I suppose, start at the beginning of the week. We have our technology exchange clubs. The Cork group meet on Saturday, and obviously they're open to people from other parts of the country, and the Dublin one on Monday. Marion, maybe ask you, you've recently been involved with the Technology Exchange Club. Could you give us an idea maybe of what you've picked up or what you've learned from being with them, or what the benefits have been?
I think definitely, Peter, the benefit is that my confidence has grown when it comes to technology, because unlike Jackie is a very techie person. I don't know about Helena and Connor, but technology scares the living daylights out of me, and I'm always afraid to try new things. As my son says to me, it's not going to blow up, ma'am, but definitely being part of the exchange group. I was really frightened when I first heard about it. I knew about it, I have to say, a couple of years ago, but never had the courage to kind of link in. But again, lockdown has done that for me. I picked up the phone and joined. I link in with the Dublin group and the Cork group, not every week, but from time to time. I have asked my questions, but definitely there are people there who have great technology expertise, and then there are the beginners like myself. So everybody is welcome. There's nobody thinks they're better than the other one, and it's great to be able to talk to the people that are using the technology that you need to use as well. So there's always something you can pick up.
That's great. And you haven't blown anything up yet, Marion, no?
Not yet, no, thank God.
Okay, well, there you go. So yeah, you can tell your son he was right, huh? That's great. Thanks very much. And I suppose in terms of learning new things and pulling new skills together, Connor, we met you first. You joined the 5-week Living with Sight Loss course that we'd originally hoped to hold physically in Drogheda, and then opened that up virtually through Zoom. So that's a 5-week course. Could you maybe give us an idea of what got covered there, or how you found the course?
Yeah, well, the course was great. So like when I was diagnosed in June, I kind of didn't know what to do myself, but my partner Aoife started looking into everything, and she found the Living in Sight Loss group. I'm not going to lie, she put me onto it. I was kind of like, right, let's get going with this. But everything that I got from it, like, it's opened up everything. Like, I know it was a basic introduction to living with sight loss, but from that, like, I got the counselling services, I got the training with the mobility. Like, there was a great talk between the long cane units and the guide dog units. I remember Miriam saying it was something at the start, and it was very interesting to listen and talk to and about each other. Yeah. And even like taking from like the tech help, which was covered in the course as well. Like, I would have been good with tech, but then I had to relearn everything again because it was doing it in a different way. Yeah. So there was days, say, on tech, there was days on, say, counselling, there was days on mobility, there was days on even like the basic stuff of getting around the house, or like little things you learn, or some of the guys here will probably know loads about it, but when you're coming just into it, even the basics of it, say the little bump-ons that you stick onto things to make things more easy to kind of find, it was those kind of little hints and tips and things that made everything a lot easier to get through. And with the course, it opened up loads. Like, there's probably like that one course that I did there has probably opened up 10 other courses that I'm doing at the moment that are great to get through the rest of the stuff.
And I think, I mean, you mentioned there, it is a relatively new experience for yourself, and the challenges arose for you earlier on this year. But the benefit of linking in with, like in this room here today, people who've been at different stages and have been living with sight loss or visual impairment for quite a while. So it's that range of experience, and I think as much as you learn from it, people also give to it as well, which is always lovely to see in terms of people's spirit of helping each other out,
Yeah, very much so. Like, there was myself and say 3 other people that were quite new to it, and then say 2 or 3 other people that had been with it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Yeah. And listening to what they were saying, and like even how they fought from the start when it was something quite new, that sight loss, someone who had a sight loss it was a little bit different, and all the kind of things they had to fight for and all the different things that they went through over the last 20, 30, 40 and 50 years and how it's changed. It was just kind of cool to see that we're actually probably coming in at a good time to be starting to have a sight loss, because it seems to be quite well looked after now.
That's great. Thanks very much for sharing, Connor. Jackie, I know you've got an involvement with a number of different groups from up there in Sligo. Maybe you could give us an idea of the coffee morning. So that's one of our new services as well. So coming on since last April as well. I know you regularly attend that. Could you maybe give us an idea of what a coffee morning looks like with yourself and the bunch there.
No, it's whenever lockdown happened, that's the first time I felt my disability. It was very lonely, vulnerable time. I had no access to my family, no nothing. To come on to something like connections it's a laugh. You know, anything and everything is discussed. There's kind of no holds barred. And it's a way of, like, I would have known people on that who would have been in the tech club, other people from the local Sligo group. But I've now made friends with these people, you know, that there is a definite connection there that has really seen me through this, and it's going to see me through now the next lockdown as well. But you don't feel alone whenever you can go on there on a Tuesday and then talk to people during the week, and then we have opportunities to have speakers in to come and talk to us, which is great. Kind of get asked questions. It's a brilliant experience, and we're a welcoming lot. Like, there could be anything from 10 people to 20. You know, it's been, and we're very welcoming.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. When no one's there, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
and it's look, you know, having been in with you on a few occasions as well. I mean, there really is there's a very nice casual vibe there as well, and you could spend the whole day, you know, the whole morning as such, talking about, you know, swapping recipes or what, you know, a good book, or sometimes complaining about the state of the country, or, you know, sharing local stories or gossip, you know. So
absolutely. And once they stop, you're kind of going, it's over now. That you could really, it feels like one of the things you could really could stay on for hours, like, you're really into the conversations, like, and you know, so it is, and it's so vital at this particular time. It's so vital to have those connections with people.
That's great, Jackie. Thanks. And I think, as you said, you know, the important thing is, you know, it may be for an hour and a half, you know, on a Tuesday as well, but the connections and the friendships made mean that you know, may well often link in with somebody outside of those times, or form your own particular groups. And at the same time, you know, somebody who you know particularly well at the coffee morning, you might link in with them in mindfulness on the Wednesday, or, you know, or in a peer support group later on in the week. So thanks for that. Helena, hiya.
Hi.
Yeah, you're I know you've been involved in a number of different groups, but more recently we started a pilot service for young people aged 18 to 30. So maybe you give us an idea of how far you're on with that group, and what you do with that group.
Yeah, so the group is piloting for 12 weeks. I think we're entering into week 5 now this week. And it's great. It's been really great to be able to link in with and build connections with people who are in my age group. So one thing that I really missed out on when I was diagnosed in my early teens was being able to identify and relate with people who were my age. And that diagnosis, I was still in Leitrim at that point. So I was in the countryside, I was isolated, it was very lonely. I didn't know anybody at all with sight loss, let alone somebody my age. Yeah. So it's been really great, especially in this time with the pandemic, to be able to link in with people and just have a chat. So we meet once a week on a Thursday evening for about an hour and a half. And any topics from cooking to college to sight loss comes up. Yeah. A bit of a laugh, and hopefully I think it's going to continue to run after the pilot as well, so monthly, which is great. So it's been great for building friendships, meeting new people. I think I've really opened up to new perspectives and thinking as well. Seeing other people's journeys and where they're at and how they're dealing with things has been eye-opening.
That's great to hear, and thanks so much for letting us know about it. I know that particular peer support group was something we've been, you know, angling towards for a long time as well. And with any of the groups, you know, in talking to all of you there, and you know, and even the groups we haven't spoken about today, I think it's always important to remember that every group is the sum of all the group members as well. So absolutely everybody involved, from the facilitators to the organisers to the participants, everybody plays a part in making that what it is. And finally, Helena, I know you've been involved with the Visionaries choir for a number of years, and unfortunately our Visionary School and the choir with the closure of Eli Place as well. How have you been getting on? Are you still taking the show online? Yeah.
Yes, I have to say I have huge respect and admiration for the conductor Frank and his daughter Rebecca, because they've really worked hard to try and get us to be able to continue the choir. It's so important for the people involved, and they get so much out of it. So it's still running. It's running virtually on a Saturday morning through Zoom from 10:30 to 12:30. And now that it's virtual, it's easier for anybody across the nation to join in as well. So we're always looking for new members. So kind of holds a special place in my heart, the choir, because it's the first group that I joined when I in Fighting Blindness, and the first group of people I ever came across with sight loss. So it's the first time I really felt that I related to people, and these are, I don't know, my kind of people in a way. That sounds a bit ridiculous, but it just, I remember walking in that morning and feeling a weight off my shoulders, and just, it was really, really nice. So
thanks so much, and look, great to know that the show goes on as well. And look, and to try and be optimistic as well. Hopefully, the time will come when you're all singing under the one roof again, and that we'll all get to meet. But look, in finishing up, today, I suppose that aspect, like you're all from different parts of the country originally, and you're all living in different parts of the country as well. Could I ask you, has meeting up with people outside of your own geographical area, has that been something that struck with you, or has that been helpful to meet with others than the usual crowd?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's really important to be able to establish connections across the island. It's such a small country. And I think there's a lot to learn from people, from sharing their experiences and perspectives from across the country. I think it's really important. It's, had this pandemic happened 30, 40 years ago, we wouldn't be able to connect with people like that. So the technology has just been so great for people with sight loss to be able to do that and connect with people across the nation.
Cheers. And Marion, you're over there in the West. I know you have a number of groups who have been quite established before, but I mean...
Great to see these three ladies from the West of Ireland. I mean, I know Helena in Dublin, but she's a West of Ireland girl at the end of the day, aren't you, Helena?
Oh, always.
But I'd just like to say a very sincere thank you to the staff in Fighting Blindness for your support over the last number of months. And you've heard me say this before, Peter, do not forget us now post-COVID, that we would be hoping, we would be hoping, and I would be appealing to the board and management of Fighting Blindness that they keep this up, because transport is such an issue for us when we can't get around the country. And I mean, even on the different groups, we were having the chats about, down the road we'll have the weekend away and we'll have the walking groups again and we'll all get to meet each other. But, we know so many people now around the country. It's been a lifesaver, I think. And like the guys have said around the table today, we can all learn so much. I was diagnosed at the age of 12, which is quite a long time ago. And, there wasn't supports and services back then. And I'm absolutely blown away now that the young people, and to hear Conor and Helena talking there about the supports that are there for them that I didn't have. When I was diagnosed, I lived from the age of 12 to the age of 40 thinking blindness was blackness and that was it. And I was scared of my life, So I think these conversations are so important. They're really brilliant. And thanks again to Fighting Blindness.
Thank you all so much. Jackie, yes, sorry, go ahead.
I'd echo what Marion said. Like, whenever I lost my sight, I had to go on local radio to get help because there was nothing available in Donegal. So like kind of I've literally lost now without Fighting Blindness. The fact that there's something on every day, that it's something to connect into every day, something to look forward to every single day. So it's absolutely brilliant.
Can I just add a point as well that I think is important to establish, is I think sight loss and mental health go hand in hand, and I think being able to connect with people across the country through technology and through these virtual online weekly meetings, I think has been really important. I know personally for me with my mental health, it's been really important to be able to weekly meet up and socialise with people. And I'm sure this is the case for many people across the country. So to anybody who's listening today and this morning, I would encourage people to get on the phone and find out what's going on in fighting blindness and what group sounds like your cup of tea, and give it a go. Because that's so isolating.
And look, I mean, and again, you know, to just get the message out there, and I know everyone here knows this as well, but you know, to let people know that we're not going anywhere, and all it will ever take is a call or an email to let us know what your situation is, and we can maybe let you know what's there. And with regards to anything, you know, sometimes people try it on the once and realize that they like it. Maybe people don't have the time commitment and they just dip in and out as they need it as well. But I just really like to thank all four of you today. I think you really kind of exemplified that spirit of digging in together and being you know, being there to assist other people and willing to give things a go. So really appreciate you joining us this morning, and just to say thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So a really good overview there of all the different services that are available here at Fighting Blindness. And so if you're interested in any of these, please do not hesitate to reach out, and you can contact the support team at insight@fightingblindness.ie. That's insight@fightingblindness.ie. Or you can also give them a call on, and I just make sure I get the number right, it's 01-674-6496. That's 01-674-6496. Peter, Mahan, Declan are all there to assist in any way. So we might move on to our next speaker, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Judith Potts to the virtual stage. Judith, I will ask to unmute and share your screen now.
Thank you all very much for inviting me today. Charles-Bonnet syndrome became part of my life on the day in 2009 when my mother, Esme, the Esme of Esme's Umbrella, suddenly said, "I do wish these people would get off my sofa." She went on to describe an Edwardian tear-stained street child and a hideous gargoyle-like creature, visions, she called them. And sometimes the whole room or garden morphed into an alien place. Well, I had absolutely no idea what could possibly be wrong with her. She was a fiercely independent 95-year-old who, despite advancing glaucoma, completed the Telegraph cryptic crossword every day. Surely she couldn't be losing her mind. But the word dementia did hang in the air. It was a small paragraph in a newspaper which revealed the cause. But that is where anything positive ended. I could not and still cannot understand why her ophthalmologist had not warned us that Esme's diminishing sight might bring with it silent, vivid, visual hallucinations. After all, forewarned is forearmed. But he refused to discuss CBS. Her optometrist had never heard of it, and her GP said I was being fanciful. So, turning to the internet, I found Dr. Dominic Fitch at King's College, London. Dr. Fitch is still the sole globally acknowledged expert and researcher in CBS, and is in fact the world's #1 for visual hallucinations of all types. He explained that when someone has lost 60% of sight, the messages from the retina to the visual cortex slow or stop, but the brain does not. The brain fires up and creates its own images, and what is seen depends on which part of the brain is firing at that moment. The sight loss can be from one of the many eye diseases, from stroke, cancer, accident, diabetes, or some other condition which damages the optic nerve. He also explained to me that CBS is not a mental health condition. It's extremely common, but very little known. In fact, we now estimate that in the UK, there are 1 million people living with CBS, children too. At that time, I was writing a health column for The Telegraph, and I began to include this orphan condition, which clearly needed to be adopted. Emails arrived in huge numbers, one of which described how the writer's mother had been admitted to a dementia unit, even though the family considered her completely sane, because she was hallucinating writhing worms and slugs on her food and in her drink. No one had heard of CBS, no reassurance was given. The woman stopped eating and drinking with very tragic consequences. Well, clearly a campaign was needed. So 5 years ago this month, I launched Esme's Umbrella at the UK's House of Commons with Dr. Fitch as my medical advisor. Since then, I have been raising awareness, sourcing funding for research, and creating a CBS community globally, I hope, for healthcare professionals too. And it's still only me. For some people, CBS is tolerable and even enjoyable, but, to quote Dr. Dominic Fitch, 1/3 of people who experience CBS have the more debilitating form, characterized by hallucinations that are much more frequent, last longer, and are more intrusive. The people that experience this also tend not to have been told about CBS before the hallucinations start. This is what happened to Esme. And there are still far too many people living in frightened silence, thinking wrongly that they have developed a mental health issue. Every patient with diminishing sight deserves that warning, because CBS can bring additional problems, falling over whilst trying to avoid the sudden appearance of a tiger, flames, or gushing water. Being unable to differentiate between what is real and what is not leads people to become housebound. And horrifying images spawn suicidal thoughts. The loneliness felt by people with CBS is about being isolated in a world of uninvited images, which it is extremely difficult to explain. Lockdown has confirmed that isolation, stress, and fever exacerbate the episodes of CBS, and people report that the images seen have become much more frightening. Peer support offers that all-important reassurance, and my telephone chat service, called Esme's Friends, gives people with CBS, their caregivers and families too, the chance to exchange experiences and coping strategies. And I know that I've spoken to Peter about possibly starting one in Ireland, which would be great. If the hallucinations are intolerable, there is now medication, but it's not CBS specific. You can find it in Dr. Fitch's recently published SHAPED study. I'm very happy to say that interest in CBS research is growing. We have seen a hopeful result from transcranial direct current stimulation to switch off the firing cells, but there are many more hurdles to jump before that can be prescribed. Cardiff and Manchester universities have begun CBS projects, as has Oxford University, and I am very proud to say that its research will be funded partly by Esme's Umbrella. Papers about the impact of COVID-19 on CBS and the prevalence of CBS in children have been published by Professor Maria Musagi. Part 2 of her work will look at the effect of CBS on children and on their families. Discovering that the guide dog of Dr. Amit Patel was warning him before a CBS episode occurred was intriguing. What is she detecting? Research by the UK's medical detection dogs will tell us. And finally, last year, with the help of Professor Andrew Dick in the UK and Dr. August Kohlenbrander in the USA, sorry, I think I seem to have pressed something, I hope not, I successfully persuaded the World Health Organization to give CBS a coding in ICD-11. Healthcare services worldwide will now have to provide a pathway for diagnosis, treatment, and support because 300 years after the birth of Charles Bonnet, no one should be left to cope alone with what he called the theatre of the mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Judith, for that and for all the work that you are doing and Esme's Umbrellas group in raising awareness around Charles Bonnet syndrome. And I would encourage all of our attendees who are joining us today to check out Esme's Umbrellas group. We do have a piece on our website also on Charles Bonnet syndrome. That's at www.fightingblindness.ie. And even on that, you'll find a link to Esme's Umbrella group. So we at Fighting Blindness have collaborated with the wonderful Dr. Alison Reynolds from UCD. And Alison is one of our long-term supporters. She's a researcher in UCD, and she comes to our public engagement day every year. And she speaks quite regularly at the Macular Impairment Support Group, MIST. And it was there that she first came across Charles Bonnet syndrome. And being a scientist, Alison has a very curious mind and wanted to really explore this further. So this year, with the support of a wonderful medical student, Claire McSweeny, who you're going to hear from now, we have been supporting Claire and Alison in undertaking a first study here in Ireland to try and understand Charles Bonnet syndrome. So Claire, I'm going to just ask to unmute and to share your video, and then I will, well, there you are. Welcome, Claire, to Retina Public Engagement Day.
Thank you. Okay, so hi everyone. Thanks for that introduction, Laura. I'm Claire McSweeny. I'm a medical student at UCD, and today I'm going to talk to you about our research project, looking at the development of a survey to examine the prevalence, characteristics, and experience of Charles Bonnet syndrome in the Irish visually impaired population from a patient perspective. I just want to say I have some slides, but I'm going to be explaining everything, so you don't need to have them in front of you. So the three project aims were to conduct a systematic review of the literature surrounding Charles Bonnet syndrome and to identify the prevalence, clinical presentation, and patient experience of Charles Bonnet syndrome in an Irish visually impaired population. And then we wanted to use this information to develop an accessible online survey that could be used to capture Charles Bonnet syndrome in Ireland. Next slide. Perfect. The first step was to gain an understanding of what is currently known about Charles Bonnet syndrome in the scientific community. So we did a review of existing literature, and it guided us in identifying the main themes surrounding Charles Bonnet syndrome. So we found that Charles Bonnet syndrome is common. Reported prevalence has been anywhere from 0.4 to 40%, and it occurs across many causes of vision loss. And there's also variation in the content of hallucinations as well as the patient impact. Next. We then used these major themes to develop our online patient survey. So we consulted with our community partners at Fighting Blindness, as well as ophthalmologists across Ireland and in Northern Ireland, and most importantly, individuals living with visual impairment, because we wanted to ensure that the survey reflected the concerns and questions of healthcare providers, as well as individuals living with sight loss. So we held focus groups with individuals with sight loss, as well as our community partners, so we could gain feedback on the survey questions to ensure that the language used was appropriate and that it was accessible. And we decided to use the online SurveyMonkey platform because it is compatible with screen readers. Next. So we have sent out a first pass of the survey. This has been a soft launch, and it's been sent out to the Fighting Blindness patient base via email. And we've also provided an option to complete the survey over the phone if individuals are not familiar with the SurveyMonkey platform. Next. So I want to preface this by saying that our results are very preliminary. We only have 28 survey responses thus far, but it has given us some insight into how prevalent Charles Bonnet syndrome is in Ireland. So to capture prevalence, the question we asked was, have you ever experienced seeing things that were not actually there? And 41% of people who filled out the survey said that yes, they had. So this is slightly higher than reported prevalences, indicating that perhaps Charles Bonnet syndrome is more common than previously thought. Next. So from the survey, we got an idea of the types of hallucinations experienced by individuals. So people reported as seeing people and faces, objects, geometric shapes, trees, and flowers. And sometimes these visions were clear and in color, but also sometimes they were black and white or blurry. Next. Individuals also reported that they experienced visual hallucinations across a range of frequencies and duration. So some people saw their hallucinations continuously, some daily, and some monthly, and the duration of the hallucinations varied. So some people reported that their visions lasted seconds, minutes, or in some cases were continuously present. Next. The patient impact was also variable. So patients reported emotions skewed towards more negative experiences. So although a few people felt amused, most individuals reported as feeling annoyed, irritated, startled, anxious, frightened, and in some cases terrified by their visual hallucinations. And in addition, the visual hallucinations disrupted many daily activities, including cooking, watching TV, exercising, walking, sleeping, reading, and relaxing. Next. Although, as I said, these are very preliminary results, our survey responses did suggest that Charles Bonnet syndrome is not usually discussed during clinical ophthalmology appointments in Ireland. So of the individuals who mentioned their visual hallucinations with their GP or their ophthalmologist, only 2 of these healthcare providers had some awareness of Charles Bonnet syndrome. So this, coupled to the fact that many individuals reported as feeling relieved after hearing about Charles Bonnet from our survey, shows that there's a real need to increase awareness of Charles Bonnet syndrome among individuals living with visual impairment in Ireland. So in conclusion, I would just like to first thank everyone who has had a hand in helping us with the development of this survey. It truly was a collaborative effort, and all the individuals who provided input, feedback, and guidance on this project were instrumental. I want to finish off by saying that the main reason we're trying to learn more about Charles Bonnet syndrome in Ireland is to increase awareness among individuals with visual impairment as well as their healthcare providers. And we want to encourage the continuous collaboration with other Charles Bonnet syndrome support groups such as Esme's Umbrella, so that we can continue to provide individuals with visual impairment information about Charles Bonnet syndrome and strategies which can be used to help them cope. I want to thank you all for listening to me today. Right now, I have the QR code for the survey up on the screen. So if you want to access the survey, I encourage you to fill it out. You can also access the survey at fightingblindness.ie. Thank you so much.
Really wonderful work there, Claire. And as we would say, we have a wonderful attendance today. There's over 200 of you joining us this morning. So we would encourage you to visit our website and complete this survey, even if you don't experience Charles Bonnet syndrome, because it's only really through getting your perspectives that we will understand the prevalence of Charles Bonnet syndrome in Ireland. So do visit our website. I know we're asking you to do a lot today for us, but this will really help the researchers in UCD to get a better understanding of Charles Bonnet syndrome. So thank you to Claire. Claire has worked so hard on this project over the last few months and has done it all the way, a lot of it all the way over in Canada because she was stuck over there during COVID. So a huge thank you to Claire for all the work that she's been doing. So do visit our website and that information about the survey will be there for everyone. We will also be emailing you the details after this event. So thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Okay, so I might just ask you, Claire, to mute and hide video for now. And Claudette. So I'm absolutely delighted. Really, actually, to be honest, I'm a little bit disappointed that I can't have Claudette here in person, because just being around Claudette, the world feels all the more better for it. So we'll have to do the best that we can for now. So Claudette is the head of science at Retina South Africa. So welcome to Fighting Blindness's Public Engagement Day 2020, Claudette.
Thank you. So I truly believe that you can actually get beyond your genes, and that your DNA need not define your life. As you heard, I'm head of science, but what we have accomplished in South Africa is really a team effort. Dedicated staff, loyal volunteers, ably led by our chairman, James Cape. Next slide you have. So who am I? In my private life, I'm a mother, a wife, a grandmother, and I hope a good friend. You've gone too fast. In my professional life, I'm a retina advocate. I'm head of science. I'm a patient counsellor. I'm a lecturer, an event organizer, and a full-time volunteer of some 40 years. In my healthy life, I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a meditator, and a life coach. For fun, I am an artist and a traveler, at least I was pre-COVID. Next slide, please. So I'd like to introduce you to a little girl, a shy, timid little 5-year-old who could not play in the street at dusk with her friends because she could not see in the dark. But because dominant RP is multi-generational, I was surrounded by people with the same kind of vision I had, or worse. In fact, if you look at the picture, 16 out of my close relatives there, 6 out of the 16, in fact, had dominant RP. Next slide, please. So my visual journey began actually at birth. I don't remember ever having been able to see in the dark. When I was older, poor contrast vision and slow adaptation times affected me in the classroom and forced me to pay attention in class, which was a good thing, and it definitely improved my memory. In my early 20s, the loss of peripheral vision started impacting my life more deeply, and I was forced to give up my beloved field hockey. I married in my, you've gone too fast, I married in my late 20s, but actually only in my early 30s did my life change. Next slide, please. My 2 dear, darling little boys were diagnosed with my RP gene, and my life changed forever, and I became an RP warrior. Next slide, please. Both my boys inherited my RP. So I was bound to start and do something. And I started a journey, a lifelong journey with Retina South Africa, together with my younger brother, who also had RP, who was luckily a great businessman. We recruited strong people from parents and patients. We established Retina South Africa and all the trimmings that went with it, the legal registration. We had to establish a board. We had to look at finances, staff, and office, which all required money. So we had to do fundraising. And then we had to create awareness, because without awareness, you can't raise funds. And we did that with our media, our patients, and of course, our doctors. We had to learn about science. We had to cultivate clinicians and researchers. We established a SMAB. We had established a genetic research project at the University of Cape Town that's still ongoing. And I needed to develop my skills. I took counseling courses, and because there was no internet to learn from, I attended conferences and meetings and learned absolutely everything that I could about retinal degeneration. And I joined the Retina International Management Committee. Retina South Africa grew and prospered, and this year, due to our excellent in-house patient registry, we were actually able to establish our first ever clinical trial for Stargardt's disease. Next slide, please. So how do I cope personally? I have wonderful family and friends. I monitor my environment. I have a symbol cane which not only helps me find steps in the dark, but also tells other people that I have a visual problem. Uber has been the most liberating thing for me because it's given me independence to travel. I always ask for help when I need it, and I always remember to thank the people adequately. When I travel abroad, I arrange for travel assistance if I'm traveling alone. I have a wonderful low vision therapist, and I use all the apps and devices I need to make my life easier. But the most important thing in my life is my husband, who is truly the wind beneath my wings. Next slide, please. So for some facts to know, because knowledge, I do believe, is power. What is your exact condition? Know its name. What is the inheritance pattern? What is the precise gene mutation? Because that will lead you to informed reproductive choices. You can identify at-risk family members. Know your vulnerabilities. Don't put yourself at risk. And talking about risk, know the risk factors for your particular condition. For example, if you've got Stargardt's or Cohen dystrophy, and you have an ABCA4 mutation, but even if you don't have a gene mutation and you suspect you may have, do not take supplements containing vitamin A. If you have Refsum's disease, of course, you've got to cut out dairy products. And Refsum's is also one of those underdiagnosed conditions. If you have been diagnosed with RP and you have a poor sense of smell, please get your phytanic acid levels checked, because if you cut out dairy, it really will stop the rate of degeneration. Next slide, please. So what do you need to do? You need to find a good ophthalmologist and a good low vision optometrist. Have regular eye checks. Because you've got RP or Stargardt's or AMD, it does not protect you from getting macular edema or glaucoma or cataracts. Visit your Fighting Blindness, IE, and if you have a gene result, please register with my Retina tracker. It's an anonymous portal that allows researchers to connect to people with rare diseases. Please look at fightingblindness.org and Fighting Blindness retinainternational.org. They're both all very good sites where you can get good information. And most importantly, please support your Retina organization like Retina Fighting Blindness Ireland, which is a magnificent patient support group. Next slide, please. Find your path. What is it that you want to do? If you're a young person and you're contemplating a career, or as you heard from Ian, maybe you've had to change your path. So if you find your passion, the rest will really follow you. And Ian was such a good example of that. Be realistic, but determined. Be patient. Perhaps you have not found it yet. I only found my path when I was in my 30s. But you will know when you're on the right path. It will feel right in your gut. Be flexible. Change direction if you have to. But don't be scared to take risks. You can only change yourself. Remember, you cannot change anybody else. And if you have power and skills, pay them forward, help others. Next slide, please. Make a plan and then stay the course. Find out, what do you have to do? Cultivate your passion. What skills do you need to learn? What are your strengths? What are your timelines? What are the barriers? What must you change? When you've done all the research and all the planning, then you perhaps just need to take that leap of faith. Next slide, please. And upskill yourself. You need to learn everything you can about your passion. You need computer skills. You need not to be scared of technology like the lady in the previous talk. Someone will help you. Learn about assistive programs, apps and devices. Do get mobility skills if you need them, and learn public speaking skills. I was petrified when I first started speaking in public. And learn money management skills, because financial independence is very important. Cultivate good mental health, and we'll get back to that. Patience, flexibility, tenacity, gratitude, compassion, a healthy lifestyle, and above all, a sense of humor. Learn to smile at yourself. Next slide, please. So what is a healthy lifestyle? Well, physical fitness equals really a happy life. I was really impressed to hear that there was a paper yesterday on the epigenome. With physical fitness, you can improve your epigenome, which actually influences your gene expression. Your immune system strengthens, your vision improves, the feel-good hormones make you feel good. Brain health and brain performance improves, probably due to the nitrous oxide increase in your blood vessels, and also the brain-derived neurotrophic factors. And get some stress management techniques like meditation, breathing, yoga, or Tai Chi. Please avoid smoking and excess use of alcohol. You might think it's a temporary stress reliever, but the long-term effects are so bad for you, so please avoid that. Next slide, please. So let's look at nutrition. 25% of your diet should be protein. Lean meats like chicken and fish are good, or legumes, nuts, beans, and quinoa. But if you use vegetable proteins, do remember to balance your essential amino acids. 50% of your diet should be fruit and vegetables, particularly green leafy vegetables, purple, red, and orange, a colorful diet. Remember your 5 a day. 25% should be starch, but they should be complex or unrefined carbohydrates. And your 10% only needs to be fat, poly or monounsaturated, no saturated or trans fats. They really are very bad for you. Good nutrition will improve the level of antioxidants in your and carotenoids, and we heard about the importance of the stress, of oxidative stress in one of the papers yesterday. And remember, the carotenoids like lutein and zeaxanthin that you find in green leafy vegetables will increase the level of your macular pigment in your macula, and that is very good because it gives you sunlight protection. Eye health improves, your liver function improves, and your gut microbiome improves. And I know there are a lot of papers that have been looking at gut microbiome and the link to AMD. Next slide, please. So what does your wheel of life look like? Well, that's my wheel of life. You know, you have only 168 hours of life per week. What you do with it is crucial. You should sleep 29%. Work should take up about 24%. So that's a 53% total. That leaves only 47% for your family, your friends, your home, your partner, your health, your community, your spirit, your relaxation, fun, and sport. Your wheel may differ. Not all parts may be equal, but do try to fill all those spokes, because if you lose one or two, your wheel still turns and your life remains in balance. Next slide, please. So we said that sleep is important. Please don't fool yourself and think you can get by with 4 or 5 hours of sleep. You can't. You need 6 to 8 hours a night. You know, we're all born with our complete complement of photoreceptors, and we've heard lately in the news that they really are getting to the point where they're going to be able to regrow photoreceptors from stem cells, but it's not there yet. But your photoreceptor discs renew while you're sleeping deep sleep between 11 and 3 o'clock. That's also the time when your brain cleanses itself. It literally washes out the toxins. Work with your circadian rhythm. Bring it gently back if it's way out. Try not to change it overnight. Change it gently. And it was also great to see that circadian rhythm actually was also addressed in the conference yesterday. Next slide, please. Cultivate perseverance and excellence. Research everything you need to know about your eye condition and about your passion. Become an expert in your field. And you might wonder why I've got a KFC bucket there. It's just to tell you that be prepared to fail. Colonel Sanders received 1,009 rejections before he was able to find someone to invest in his crazy idea of a fried chicken chain of stores. Be prepared to fail. But when you take the first step, the universe truly moves with you. Find a mentor or mentors. They will help and advise you. But in the end, trust your own intuition. Choose your friends wisely. You will need them your whole life. When you mess up, learn from the experience and then truly move on. But remember that you learn more from your failures than your successes. And when you do make a mistake, forgive yourself. We're all human. But adversity makes you stronger. And the biggest threat is fear. Next slide, please. Fear is truly the greatest obstacle that we have. And we all experience fear. It's the most common neurological problem. It manifests as panic attacks, insomnia, anxiety, shortness of breath, stomach pains, headaches, poor immune system, and emotional or mental paralysis. We all face the same scary, unknown future. Choose to create your reality and fear honestly disappears. Confront your fear by holding yourself accountable for every moment, every thought, every action, and every reaction. And pushing through fear is less frightening than living with the terror of helplessness. You can learn to overcome fear, and it was great to hear the wonderful help that's being offered to the patients in Ireland by Peter O'Toole and his group, and you can find help. Next slide, please. Feel the fear and do it anyway. There's a photograph of me walking on fire. I know it sounds impossible, but believe me, I have done it. That was the scariest thing I ever had to confront, but also the most empowering. Once you have walked on those hot coals, you really have an altered mindset. So much so that when we swam with the magical pink blind dolphins in the River Amazon, the thought of caimans and piranhas never even entered my mind. So if you get the opportunity to walk on fire, I truly recommend it. Next slide, please. I was really amazed, horrified, in fact, to see the results of the IRD counts, the cost of illness study that RI and partners have just published, to study what is the true social economic cost of inherited retinal degeneration to the state and to the patient. The first study was done, of course, in Ireland and in the UK, but the new study focuses on America and Canada. The cost of inherited retinal degeneration in the USA is $31.7 billion US dollars, and in Canada, $1.6 billion. And the components of that, 66% of the costs are well-being, 13% loss of production, 2% healthcare, and 10% to informal carers. And mostly these costs are borne by the patients. Next slide, please. So let's look at well-being, or in fact the lack of it. The major issue that was identified by the patients interviewed were anxiety, depression, stress, and isolation. And some of those actually came out in Peter O'Toole's talk. Please do not ignore these debilitating problems. Seek help, and seek it early, not later. Next slide, please. So, are you going to be a victim or a victor? You can choose, and that's very liberating and also very scary, but it is your choice. Firstly, I suggest you totally resist being labeled by your condition. I have RP, I am not an RPer. I would like to introduce some patients who have chosen victory. Anoop, he is 30, he's a physiotherapist. He always wanted to be a doctor and was told he couldn't because of his vision. And despite opposition, he really did finish his course, and he's now a registered medical doctor. Anoop has Stargardt's disease. Alani is 21. She's a final year BCom student. She's a Paralympic swimmer, and her motto is now or never. Alani has Stargardt's disease. Josi is 31. He's a mining engineer, and he actually lost his job due to his vision. He went and got his MBA, and he's now an entrepreneur dedicated to help other people with sight loss achieve their dreams. He's a golfer and a father, and Josi has Cohen-Rod dystrophy. I don't know him, but Isaac Litsky from America is an amazing man. He's a lawyer and an author and a lecturer and an entrepreneur. He has RP, and please look for him on TED.com. Steve Wynn from America, I don't know either. I've seen him on TV, of course. He's a hotel and casino magnate, and he's a billionaire, and he has RP. And Gordon Gunn from America is the most amazing man I think I've ever met. He's a billionaire. He's co-founder of the Foundation Fighting Blindness in America, the first ever patient group. He has RP. And I would just like to say publicly how sad we all were to hear that his wife and partner Lily passed away this year. But there are many others. Christina Fasser, who's just retired as president of Retina International, your own Michael Griffiths and Avril Daly. They're all inspiring victors. Many people use the lack of vision as an excuse for lack of effort. You're not rich enough, educated enough, sighted enough, loved enough. I want to tell you today that you are enough. You can choose to be a moaner or a mover. You can be victim or victorious. The choice is truly yours. Next slide, please. And what about those two young boys who started me on this journey? Well, of course, they're grown men now. And what else did they inherit, or I hope learn, from my husband and I? Hopefully, tenacity, honesty, integrity, loyalty, courage, compassion, and most importantly, an ability to love unconditionally. Next slide, please. So this is Grant, my eldest son, and he went into graphic design, and that was a disastrous choice, everybody said, for a child with RP, but he's a very talented graphic designer. He's a co-founder of a very successful graphic design studio in Cape Town called Simpler. He's a devoted father to Byrne, aged 8, and he's a wannabe surfer. So with RP, you know, you do not see depth and contrast very well. So he has very good friends, and they call the waves for him, because with big wave surfing, you have to get the wave just at the right sweet spot. And they tell him when to paddle into the wave. And this picture, for those who can't see, is Grant coming out of a 20-foot barrel that he caught in the Maldives last year. And Grant, as you know, has RP. Next slide, please. And Craig, my youngest, he has an honors degree in VCOM marketing. He's national sales manager of an IT corporate. He enjoys warrior games, running, cycling, swimming, anything that's bold and fast. He is totally charming and a natural leader, and I'm sure you see that in his face. He's a devoted husband and a father to Kayla of 9, and Craig has RP. So the next slide, please. I want to tell you about the power of genetics. As you know, both of my sons inherited my RP13 gene. They are devoted fathers, so I'm the proud grandmother of 2 delightful little girls. We knew which gene we had, it's RP13. So luckily we were able to test them at a very young age. And next slide, please. The good news is that neither Kayla or Byrne have inherited the RP13 mutation. Next slide, please. And so finally, I want to leave you with just a few things. Embrace your potential. Don't be scared to achieve. My dad, who had RP, said, dream big, but my mom said, hard work makes dreams come true. Overcome your perceived limitations. Practice compassion and really start with yourself. Always be totally honest with yourself. Choose your reality. Make mindfulness your default mode. And remember that in the words of Winnie the Pooh, you are braver than you believe, you are stronger than you seem, and you are smarter than you think. Thank you very much.
Claudette, thank you so much for what was a really motivating and inspirational talk. So much, there is just so much in that all of us can learn and benefit from. So just to reassure our attendees, we are recording this and this will be available on our platforms very soon. So because I think it's something that we can go back to and listen to many, many times. and pick up something new. So thank you, Claudette. Again, unfortunately, we can't give you the hug that we would love to give you right now, but hopefully very soon we can meet again in person. Our next speaker really doesn't really need an introduction, and that is Professor David Keegan, and he is a keen supporter of fighting blindness. He sits on our board of directors. He is a consultant ophthalmologist in the Mater Hospital. And David today is going to join us and give us a little bit of guidance around looking after our eyes in what is a very different world to what we knew this time last year. So David, I might just ask you to start your video. And welcome to Retina 2020 Public Engagement Day, David.
Great, Laura, thank you very much. And I want to say good afternoon nearly to everybody, and echo the statements we made so far on another wonderful Retina meeting, which Laura and Eve and the team with Kevin have put together. It's phenomenal how you raise the game every single year, Laura. And I was just doing a quick calculation there. I've been involved in ophthalmology for 25 years. I've been a consultant for 14 years. And every Retina meeting, I get so much, it nearly feels selfish, and I feel an element of guilt to come in supposedly as an expert and speak about things, but I learn so much at every single Retina, and particularly the Patient Engagement Day. And this morning has been no different. Really, to listen to Ian speak so openly, honestly and personally about his own challenges. And as a rugby fan, I'm delighted, Ian, that you stuck with rugby. We cheered you on in our house when you ran out for Italy for the first time. I'm glad you didn't go to Gaelic football. On a personal note, two of the worst eye injuries I've dealt with, similar to your own story, were actually from the Gaelic football pitch, one accidental and one deliberate. We heard this morning amazing talk from Peter and the team, and brilliantly presented with the contributions from around the country of how important that support for all of you living with sight loss, or those near and dear to you living with sight loss, have to endure. And the pivot around, I want to touch a little bit on that, about the reaction to the pandemic by fighting blindness and indeed eye care providers across the country. And then to hear Judith and Claire talk about a really challenging condition. When you listen to it there, eye care professionals, we've got to up our game. I've been aware of Charles Bonnet syndrome from my time at Moorfields, and it is something that we just do not spend enough time discussing, raising with our patients. I know there are a number of my own patients on the chat box there and on the panel, and we don't cover this off. And thank you for raising awareness, and I'll do all I can with my college, through the Irish College, my colleagues, and through the Irish College of Ophthalmologists, to make sure we get that message out to embrace it. And finally, Laura, I have a bone to pick with you in putting me on the schedule after Claudette was a little bit unfair. How do you follow an inspiring, personal, heartfelt, informative message that Claudette has given to us there about her own personal journey and how it relates to all people living with sight loss, and not just those with inherited retinal degenerations? And Claudette, with your permission, I took a photograph of your final slide to go home and share with my own children when I get back to the house. So thank you very much for all of that. And Claudette, you've covered a number of issues around eye care and eye health that I'm going to cover this morning around the dietary needs. So I'm going to talk a little bit practically. There's a chat box and a Q&A box on the forum there. So I was making a decision about how long to make this talk. I'm going to try and keep it brief, because we normally have the breakout sessions at Fighting Blindness at Patient Engagement Day, which we obviously can't have this year, but I still wanted to have an ability for that interaction. So in the QA box, please put up your questions. If there are lots, we may not get to all of them, but put them up and I'll try and address them through the talk this morning. And I'll leave a little bit of time for that Q&A at the end, because we have a decent slot. When we talk about eye care, and really we're talking about prevention of serious consequences from any issues around eyes. And a lot of the hints and tips in the middle of the pandemic are the same as you would anyway. Don't ignore symptoms, particularly symptoms that persist. If you've got pain, sight loss, distortion, that persists for more than 24 hours, go and see an eye care professional, such as your eye doctor, your optometrist, or attend your GP and get some guidance from there. Don't ignore these things. Unfortunately, over the pandemic, we had a number of cases where people did ignore symptoms. They were afraid to come into hospital. But as I'll explain in a few minutes, we have readjusted our whole environment, and the optometry teams have done that as well in their high street locations to make these places safe to engage with. So please don't ignore these symptoms and do attend us. I was at the, I had to dip out of the Retina meeting yesterday to go to the British and Irish Retinal Society meeting, which is also a virtual event, but it was disturbing to see the reports from all across the UK and mirrored in our own unit of delayed presentations of patients with retinal detachment to all those units and adverse outcomes as a result of that. So it's not a feature of the second wave we've had since September, but I think it's a little early to call it yet. So don't ignore those symptoms. I want to touch on one very common condition, blepharitis, and which is not genetic. It doesn't garner a lot of real research, but it's a very problematic condition for many people, particularly this time of year. So in my own practice, there's a spike in attendances for patients with painful, sore, itchy eyes with discharge and tearing, particularly if they go out for a walk, and many of you on the call will recognize those symptoms. And that's really blepharitis, inflammation of the eyelids. There's two types of it. You can get a sort of a dandruff, sort of a little mite infection on the eyelids, which you clean off with a cotton bud or commercially available lid wipes like BlephaClean or Blepha wipes. But more commonly it's due to the blockage of the oily glands just behind the eyelashes called meibomian glands. And these are modified sweat glands. And they provide the lipid or the oily part of your tears, which give your tear film stability. And when they block up, they cause local inflammation and irritation, but then you can't get the tears into the tear film. So that's why you get excess tearing as a response to that. And then you get irritation. So just simple measures like warm compressive massage, a face cloth in warm water held over the closed eyelid, and massage your eyelid just like that. Apologies to those who can't see what I'm doing. You just massage the eyelid, and that will settle a lot of those symptoms down. And I just want to make a note about that, as Claudette said, irrespective of your underlying eye condition, you can still get a lot of these symptoms can affect you, particularly when it gets cold this time of year. And that you may be able to manage a lot of that just yourself. I want to talk about specific issues around the pandemic and how, explain how we reacted to it in March and April and how it suddenly seemed it was difficult to get access, how we've pivoted in the meantime, and how you access eye care services now. And I think that really is quite important. Back at the beginning, there was a lot of concern. Patients with COVID-19 also had, some of them got a viral conjunctivitis. So nobody with a conjunctivitis was getting into an eye unit. They were asked to manage conservatively and stay away from the busy eye departments. And we're still more or less keeping that advice on board. The major eye emergency departments, particularly at the Royal Victoria Eye and Ear and ourselves here at the Mater Hospital and others around the country, no longer run a walk-in service. So you do have to get a referral and email or phone in with that referral, and then you'll get a booked appointment. So when you do get a booked appointment, that you will get that a slot, but attend for the slot at that time. And when you get to the hospital, you notice a lot of measures will have been taken around the hospital. You'll get a phone call before you come to make sure you don't have symptoms of COVID-19 or been in close contact with somebody with COVID-19. When you get to the hospitals, hand sanitizers everywhere. You'll be asked to wear a mask through your hospital visit. You'll notice that there'll be fewer people in the waiting area than you would maybe normally be used to. The staff will be behind Perspex screens, and a lot of the equipment have Perspex dividers. That's to keep you safe and to keep the staff safe. So just that you're aware of that. We're in the middle of doing a video here at the Mater Hospital, but in the meantime, there is a video available through our colleagues in the Belfast Trust in Northern Ireland, the Macular Clinic, and afterwards we'll get that posted up, a link to that video, and it's very similar to what we have in the eye units around the country. So that's just how you get your appointment, say for an eye emergency, and that you will attend at a specific point in time. We will say to you, if you do get an appointment, please come for your appointment. Don't be so scared about going into the hospital. It's not like back in April. The hospitals are actually relatively safe places to come and visit, provided you obey all the rules. So if you get an appointment for a screening appointment for diabetes, for an eye emergency department, for your clinic, and particularly for surgery, do attend for that appointment. When you're coming to the hospital, you'll get a phone call ahead of time with all your screening questions. Answer those truthfully. We've had a few situations where they haven't been, and it causes a bit of distress on the day to everybody concerned. Somebody bringing you to hospital, if at all possible, they stay outside, and then you come on inside and attend your appointment. If you're coming for an operating list, you may be also asked to have a swab before coming in, particularly for a general anesthetic, and that you make that appointment for a swab. So if you don't have a clear swab, you won't be able to come in for a general anesthetic. This is very important for you and for the team. People who are COVID positive have a greater risk then of transmitting that under general anesthetic to anaesthetists and to other staff members. And if somebody is COVID positive and has a general anesthetic, there's a significant mortality rate from that situation. So it's in your interest, if you are COVID positive, that you do not undergo a general anesthetic. So it's for the safety of everybody. And you'll come at a designated time. Now, the benefit of all of that is that you'll find your actual patient experience, and patients have relayed back to us that they find it an awful lot more timely, they're seen in it quicker, and the time actually in the hospital is much less. They're the general features, and Claudette touched on this there around inherited retinal degenerations. And in this era, and as well, it's been one of our disappointing things that our own IRD clinic in the Mater has had to step back because it was deemed non-essential clinical care. But we've been able to manage and pivot the team to actually deliver that care over the phone and by virtual clinics. I'll talk a little bit about that, how we've kept our counselling service in particular going. There's parts about the condition we've inherited retinal degeneration that you can't change, the underlying genetic alteration, and with gene therapy we hope to modify that. But Claudette touched on this. Don't forget that you're also at risk of developing cataract, glaucoma, macular edema, and these need to be addressed and dealt with. So, and then, and even if not, if there's progression in your vision deterioration, that we can get you access to the rehabilitation team, to the eye clinic liaison officer, and those supports that were touched on in Peter's segment earlier on from many of the people that came on. And that is very important, not to ignore those symptoms, so we can actually manage those comorbidities along the line. With macular degeneration, I want to make a couple of specific points. One, if you're on a treatment regime, you should continue to come for your injections. We did not stop injections in the first phase for those that most needed it. We restarted our full injection service in May, and that has been the case since. So please come for your injection appointments and do have it. We have everything set up to be safe, and we have the average time in the hospital for a patient coming for injection at the Mater. You are in the hospital for between 20 and 30 minutes and no more. With that in mind, I also want to point out that a recent paper came out. So those with patients with macular degeneration, if they do get COVID-19, are at greater risk of having a serious adverse outcome, either needing respiratory support or intensive care treatment and support. So we ask you to be extra vigilant if you do have macular degeneration around any potential COVID contacts, and that you look after yourself by following the regular rules as given out by our public health experts. I'm just going to stop there just for a second. I want to just answer some of the queries that have come through on the screen there. And there was one that was put up. I'm going to one that's up in front of me. Was around, there was one that was up in front of me around vitreous detachment. Vitreous detachment should not cause sight loss. Now, if you've got macular degeneration and cataracts, that can be addressed, and that you to talk to your eye care provider about that. Somebody asked about tuberculosis. TB is still with us. It can still affect people. And if you do have you're diagnosed with tuberculosis, yes, it can cause inflammation inside your eye. And then to deal with that, if that is an issue, but to discuss that with your eye care provider. There's a question here about amblyopia, is otherwise colloquially known, and I hate the phrase, as a lazy eye. And amblyopia usually relates to an issue you might have in childhood, where you have a squint, or one eye is more short-sighted or long-sighted than the other, and the eye vision pathways don't develop as completely as would be the case in normal situations. Unfortunately, there's no active treatment for amblyopia at the moment. There's a question here about retinitis pigmentosa, about somebody not wearing their sunglasses. Look, as a basic premise, reduction in exposure of the retina to ultraviolet A and B light will protect it. They are oxidating wavelengths, and they can cause oxidative damage. So when you've got compromised retina, you try and minimize your exposure to ultraviolet light. So basically, we have to minimize that exposure, and the wearing of sunglasses helps in that regard. But it's up to somebody to make their own mind up whether they're going to wear them or not, but they are beneficial. There's a question here about ophthalmologists specializing in aniridia. Yes, you're looking for an anterior segment specialist, and there are a large number of those in the country, but usually aniridia becomes apparent in pediatric population. So if you look to pediatric specialists such as Catherine McCreary and Donald Brosnan in Crumlin, and in Temple Street, we've got Sarah Chamley, Stephen Farrell, Susan Fitzsimons, and Ian Flickcroft. So there's a large number that would look after a child with aniridia. Just had a quick other question coming in here. So somebody here with congenital glaucoma and a cataract. So congenital glaucoma, you're under the age of 16, those pediatric ophthalmologists I've named there will see you. Specifically, I know Stephen Farrell and Sarah Chamley in Temple Street, and over in Crumlin, Donald Brosnan and Catherine McCreary, and we've got a fabulous colleague, Claire Hartnett, who's just joined the team on both sides. So really, it's up to the clinical team to determine how appropriate it is for you to go have surgery. So somebody's just asked about retinal reattachment surgery. Retinal reattachment surgery is very successful, and usually we fix about 90% of these, about 10% redetachment rate. But even with that, the final reattachment rate nowadays is around 98, 99%, and the vast majority of patients, about 70%, retain or regain very good vision. Okay, I might just pick a few through here.
David, I think we just have maybe a minute for one or two questions, and allow people to get some coffee before we go into the afternoon.
Perfect. But I'm going to just briefly, I did want to touch on some of the other, on some of those, but we're living in very strange times. And I stress again the importance of the standard techniques around distancing, hand hygiene, wearing a mask, and limiting your direct contacts. The medical system in Ireland is open. We are not overwhelmed as we potentially were back in April and May. So please go and make your appointments. We've managed to pivot a lot of change, and the future is very, very encouraging in this regard. There's a lot of process change through lean process management, so you'll find much more efficient units from here. We have embraced technology, and our own unit have been able to bring in things that we had planned for 3 or 4 years, and we've been able to bring them in over the last 6 months. Manage patients at home, change your care to the community, limit the number of times you've got to come into the hospital, virtual access to experts, are linking into the European Reference Network Rare Eye Disease Consortium so that patients with rare conditions can get ready access to continental experts. We are using our time. We've done a lot of things. We've cleared our backlog around counselling. We've commenced our pediatric screening program. We've set up clinical trials, and now doing counselling, as I say, by video calls. We've increased our genetic testing capacity, and we've opened up new pathways for that, and we're well on the way to being able to have that available at the Mater. We talk about starting clinical trials, and it's been touched on a lot this morning. So we have a study starting on anxiety and depression. We're hoping to run that through Fighting Blindness. So those of you on the line, please stay alert and watch the Fighting Blindness website. We will be recruiting patients for that. Mind your sight, it's precious. Mind yourselves, you're even more precious. And Laura, thank you very much for having me on this morning.
Thank you so much, David. And really, you know, there's just not enough time to answer all the questions, but what I'll reassure everyone is that we have received your questions, and we will work with David, the research team will work with David over the next week and get back to you on those. And please be reassured that next year, early next year, we're going to have condition-specific webinars, and hopefully David will join us again, and it will allow more time for that so that we can really focus on each condition and give that the time that it deserves. So thank you, David. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you were able to grab a coffee or a tea to keep going. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome our next guest, and who is now a really good friend of Fighting Blindness Ireland. He joined us in 2018, and I think every year we needed to get Ben Shaberman back because his ability to communicate research is just fantastic. So Ben, many of you would have met before, is the Senior Director of Science Outreach and Community Engagement at Foundation Fighting Blindness in America, and also an accomplished author. So hopefully he'll share a little bit on his most recent novel with us. He's here today to bring us the latest news from retinal research. So Ben, you're very welcome to Retina 2020, the virtual public engagement day. What time?
Great, thank you everyone. It's such an honor and a delight to be presenting to the constituents of Fighting Blindness Ireland. I'll be going over some of the highlights in retinal research going on right now. A lot of clinical trials, some emerging therapies that are moving into clinical trials. And I guess this is a good thing, I won't have time to cover everything. So I'm happy to follow up with any of your questions. And you can move on to the next slide. And as Laura said, I had the real pleasure of visiting Dublin last year or 2 years ago at this time. And I got to see a lot of great sites, Cliffs of Moher and the Trinity College, Newgrange. But one of the great little finds that I had was I visited Howth. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Howth?
You are, yeah, Howth.
Okay. Yeah, I accomplished something this morning. Anyway, I stumbled across this little museum called the Hurdy-Gurdy Vintage Radio Museum. It's on a hill. It wasn't on any map that I had, and it's this small circular building that's packed with all these old-time radios from World War I, World War II, and the gentleman there just for about an hour described all the different radios and the history of the museum. So it was a nice little find that maybe not all of you know about. So if you're ever in Howth, I strongly encourage you to look up the Hurdy-Gurdy Vintage Radio Museum. Okay, well, let's get into the research here. We can go to the next slide. So when I present research, I often like to give context for where the research is at, sort of from the big picture. And there are at least 40 clinical trials currently underway across the US and Europe and other parts of the world for emerging therapies. And this number continues to increase every couple months. We get a new clinical trial, and I know there's going to be another announcement of a clinical trial in another day or two. The company that I'm thinking of has not formally announced it, so sorry, I can't say what that will be. But over the past 12, 13 years, we've gone from just a handful of clinical trials to now over 40. So it's a very exciting time. And again, I'll be covering many of these. And in addition to the clinical trials, there are many, many more therapies that are in the clinical trial pipeline that are a year or two away from moving into human studies. So this momentum will continue to build in the coming years. And what's exciting for us, and I'm sure Fighting Blindness Ireland, is the research that we're we're funding is attracting outside investment from companies. And you'll see in many of my slides references to companies that are starting up to get these therapies into clinical trials. And then there are bigger companies, big pharmaceutical companies and biotechs that are then licensing the technologies or acquiring the companies to move them all the way through the clinical trials. You have to keep in mind a clinical trial costs hundreds of millions of dollars to complete. It may cost a few million or 10 or 20 million to get it into the clinical trial, but to get it through the trial, you need hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's really important to attract those outside investments. So let's start off talking about gene therapy. We can move to the next slide. So just a quick overview of what gene therapy is. And I'm guessing that many of you understand that in the inherited retinal disease space, these conditions are all caused by mutations in a single gene. So for just about everybody affected, there's only one gene that's at the root cause of the problem. Now, there is a challenge in that there are more than 270 genes, each of which can cause a retinal disease. So it's a very diverse group of rare conditions. But what researchers envisioned decades ago was delivering new copies, healthy copies of the gene in question to replace the mutated gene. So replace the bad copies with good copies. And that's what's worked really well thus far in human studies. And the way that's being done in most cases is that researchers are engineering viruses. They're like containers to deliver the genes into retinal cells. And in this image on the right, this knobby, colorful ball is a viral container. And in a gene therapy, there are literally millions and millions of these containers to deliver the needed gene to the retina. And we use viruses because they're very adept at penetrating cells of the retina. Now, these viruses, as they naturally occur, are safe, and they're engineered for therapies, they're not in their native form. So these are very safe. Obviously, when you hear virus these days, we get a little nervous. But again, these are very, very safe. So that's the basic concept behind gene therapy. And I'll qualify that further by saying this is gene replacement therapy. There are other ways you can use gene therapy besides replacing the bad gene with a good gene, and we'll be talking about those in a few slides. So let's move on to the next slide. So I'm guessing that many of you know about Luxturna. It's the first gene therapy that received regulatory approval for the eye or any inherited condition. It's approved in the US by the FDA and other regulatory agencies in Europe and other parts of the world. This is for people who have mutations in the gene RPE65. This is one gene, but the therapy in clinical trials and now that it's commercially available has had outstanding results, especially with younger kids. These kids have been able to put away their canes. They could see stars in the sky for the first time. Many are seeing their parents' faces for the first time. So very dramatic results. This came out of labs in the US, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and University of Pennsylvania. I'm proud to say that Foundation Fighting Blindness in the US funded research for those early studies. It moved into clinical trials in 2017 at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. CHOP spun off a small startup company called Spark Therapeutics in 2013. The clinical trial was already off the ground then. And then about a year ago, Roche Pharmaceuticals acquired Spark Therapeutics for, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 billion. And I think the most important takeaway in talking about Luxturna, not only is it helping that subset of people with RPE65 mutations, but it's really provided affirmation. It's opened the door to using gene therapy to treat inherited retinal diseases. It's affirmation for companies and researchers that this is a good way to go to save and restore vision. So let's talk about some of the other clinical trials that are underway. So we can go to the next slide. So one company that has a couple of clinical trials underway is Biogen, and their choroideremia gene therapy is in a phase 3. That's worked impressively in earlier phases, and they've completed enrollment in the phase 3. So when they get the final data from this phase, they'll be hopefully ready to move on to the regulatory agencies. So if you look back on what's happened with choroideremia, there was important research funded at University College of London. Then University of Oxford launched a clinical trial, spun off a company called Nightstar, and then about a year ago, Biogen acquired Nightstar. So this is a similar trajectory to Spark. And it was that early lab funding that got things going. Now, Biogen, along with 2 other companies that I'll be talking about, also has a gene therapy in the clinic for X-linked RP. And they've recently moved into a phase 2/3, which again is the last phase before they can potentially move into or submit the therapy application to the regulatory agencies. And there's been some visual improvements in this trial as well. So our fingers are crossed. Next slide, please. So another company in the US that's been doing well in the gene therapy space is called Applied Genetics Technology Corporation, or AGTC. And they too are moving their X-linked RP gene therapy into a phase 2/3. They've shown improvements in visual acuity and retinal sensitivity. Their trial at this point is just in the US. I honestly don't know if they're planning on launching some sites overseas in Europe for their clinical trial. We'll have to wait and see. AGTC also has clinical trials underway for a condition called achromatopsia, which, because it affects cones give us vision in daylight settings in bright conditions. Because achromatopsia affects cones, it causes day blindness. People can't see in light very well. It's kind of the opposite of RP. Those trials are at an earlier stage. They have had some encouraging results, but it's early. So we're waiting to hear about more data coming from their achromatopsia trials. Now, AGTC is also pursuing clinical trials for dry AMD and Stargardt disease. Those have yet to move into those clinical trials, so stay tuned there. The last thing I'll say is AGTC is a very close partner of the Foundation Fighting Blindness here in the US. So yet another company coming out of the UK, Mira GTX, is partnering with Janssen also on some X-linked RP and achromatopsia clinical trials. Mira GTX also had encouraging results for their X-linked RP gene therapy in phase 1/2. They are also moving into phase 3 as well. They do have sites in the US and a couple of sites in the UK as well. They as well have a chromatopsia gene therapy clinical trials underway and have yet to report data there. Those are at an earlier stage, so stay tuned there. So let's move on to another slide, please. So I've given you some highlights of the trials that have moved further along. There are several other trials that are at an earlier stage or soon to be moving into the clinic. Harama, a company in France, has a clinical trial underway for RP, for people with mutations in PDE6 beta. I'll note that they're working with Nijmegen in the Netherlands to launch a clinical trial for people with CRB1 mutations. Mutations in that gene also cause LCA. Novartis in Sweden has a clinical trial underway for RP caused by RLBP1 mutations. Another trial underway here in the US at University of Pennsylvania is for people with GUCY2D mutations. There's a little startup company that we're funding called Etsena that's come out of Shannon Boy's lab out of the University of Florida. And again, that trial is underway. Now, some other preclinical work that's going on, hopefully to move into the clinic soon. This is by no means everything, but just some examples. There's a company called Iveric Bio who's pursuing clinical trials for rhodopsin mutations, which cause RP, Best disease, Stargardt disease, and CEP290 mutations that lead to LCA. I mentioned AGTCs working on Stargardt disease and dry AMD. And Shannon Boy, through Etsena and her lab at University of Florida, is also pursuing a gene therapy for USH1B. Just a little comment I'll make there. USH1B is a challenging condition to treat with gene therapy because it's a large gene. It's hard to put it in one of those containers I was talking about. But Shannon's developing a technology to split the gene and put it into 2 containers. And then when those containers arrive in the retina, they combine to form a full gene. So it's called dual vector technology. It's very cutting edge, and we're excited about the progress Shannon is making for that. That same technology could be used for Stargardt disease as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so we talked about gene therapy, gene replacement therapy, where you're moving or you're delivering an entire gene to the retina to replace that mutated gene. So gene editing, specifically through CRISPR-Cas9, is different. Instead of delivering a whole new gene, you're simply editing the gene that's mutated in the retina. Sometimes I like to refer to this as cut and paste. So you're delivering a pair of quote unquote molecular scissors to cut out the mutation. And in some cases, you may be delivering a tiny piece of gene to also help that gene function correctly, but you're not delivering an entire gene. So this approach is a little more targeted toward the specific mutation that's causing the retinal disease. Now, a collaboration between Editas and Allergan several months ago launched a phase 1/2 clinical trial for a specific mutation in the gene CEP290. Now, what's really important about this trial, it's the first time that CRISPR-Cas9 has been delivered to the human body to treat any disease in any part of the body. So there has been some CRISPR work done on cells outside the body, and then the cells are delivered to the body. But this is applying CRISPR-Cas9 directly into the retina of the affected patients. So they haven't reported results. They are also pursuing a clinical trial for USH2A for a region called exon 13. That's a hotspot in the USH2A gene where a lot of mutations occur. And I'll also note there's a lot of great CRISPR-Cas9 work going on in preclinical studies in other labs. I know the Foundation Fighting Blindness US, we have about 5 or 6 labs that we're funding that are pursuing CRISPR, including Hadassah in Israel, a lab in Italy, and there are others. So this is newer. It has the benefit of targeting specific mutations and helping people with these larger genes, which are harder to replace. So stay tuned as we get more of these approaches into clinical trials, and we'll see what happens. I think this is a promising approach. So next slide, please. So the next technology gets a little more complex in terms of how it works. And I'll try to simplify that discussion by saying that your cells, while they have DNA, and the DNA is the code or the genes that help your cells survive and do what they need to do, your cells have a messaging system to communicate that genetic information. And that messaging system works through what we call RNA, where that genetic information is communicated throughout the cell so that the cells know how to function and which proteins to make. So this company in the Netherlands called ProCure is targeting the RNA, the messages, not the DNA, but the genetic messages. And their technology, which is called antisense oligonucleotides, or AONs, I know that's a mouthful, but that technology is simply a small piece of genetic material to cover up the mutation in those genetic messages. And you can think of it as like a tiny piece of genetic tape to cover up the mutation in the messages. And the Foundation Fighting Blindness in the US is investing $7.5 million in this company specifically for their USH2A exon 13 clinical trial. But ProCure also has clinical trials underway for LCA, a specific mutation in CEP290. There were nice vision improvements reported in the phase 1/2 a few months ago, or I should say now actually several months ago. They moved into a phase 2/3. So we're anticipating additional results from there. ProCure, again, also has a clinical trial underway for USH2A mutations in exon 13. They reported some very early encouraging results, and they also have a clinical trial underway for the P23H mutation in rhodopsin, which is a common cause of RP. They're still yet to announce any results from that, so stay tuned. Also in development in the ProCure pipeline is the PE40 mutation in USH2A, some other LCA genes, and Stargardt disease, a specific mutation there. They have a very active pipeline. These clinical trials are all relatively new, so they're doing a great job at accelerating their research and getting it into the clinic. So next slide, please. So we've talked about gene replacement. We've talked about gene editing. We've talked about targeting RNA with the genetic tape in ProCure. Optogenetics is yet another approach to gene therapy. So I'm really testing your capacity to understand gene therapy today, but this is all very exciting stuff. So on the right side of the diagram here, I have a side view of the retina. And at the top of this diagram are vertically oriented cells we call the photoreceptors, the rods and cones. These are the cells that make vision possible. They process light, they absorb light, they convert it into electrical signals which are sent to the back of the brain to create the images we see. So in people with retinal diseases, they lose photoreceptors. If somebody has an advanced retinal disease where they've lost all their vision, it's because they've lost all their photoreceptors. Now, the difficult news for somebody who's lost all their photoreceptors is all the genetic techniques I've talked about up to this point don't apply because there aren't any photoreceptors left to receive these genetic therapies. But here's the good news, the promising news, is that researchers have identified other cells in the retina, they're called ganglion cells, that survive even after someone has lost all their photoreceptors. In many cases, these ganglion cells survive. And I have an oval circling those ganglion cells. And what they're doing now in clinical trials is they're delivering a gene to these ganglion cells to make them light sensitive so that they work, quote unquote, something like photoreceptors. So it's a way of harnessing other cells in the retina for vision other than photoreceptors. What's nice about this approach is it's designed to work regardless of the gene that's causing somebody's vision loss. So this is gene agnostic. Now there are 3 clinical trials underway, Allergan, GenSight, and another company in the US called Bionic Sight. And I won't get into all the details for sake of time on the different approaches here. They're all at a still relatively early stage, and we're still learning here. But there are other approaches to optogenetics which look, I think, at least technically speaking, even more promising that will be moving into clinical trials. There's a company called Bayonne that has a molecule that they're moving toward a clinical trial. Another company called Videre, which we funded, that was recently acquired by Novartis. That technology is even more elegant than what's in clinical trials. So this space is really active. It's early, but it's really active. So I think there's a good reason for hope, but it's early, so stay tuned. Okay, next slide, please. So now I want to move into the stem cell space. And I think it's important to understand that stem cells are still in an earlier stage of development. They're not quite as far along as gene therapies. But the real benefit of stem cells, there are 2 aspects of them that are very beneficial. One, you can make a stem cell into almost any cell type in the body. So you can grow new muscle, blood, heart, lung, and obviously in our world, we can make them into new retina, photoreceptors, and other cells in the retina. Now, the other benefit of stem cells is that you can make literally billions and billions of cells for a treatment from a tiny sample of stem cells. So they're easily replicated. You don't need many of them to make thousands and thousands of treatments. Now, there are a number of ways you can derive stem cells, and we've probably all heard of embryonic stem cells and other similar approaches. But what researchers are doing now, what's starting to move into the clinic, this is happening in Japan actually, they're taking mature blood from a healthy adult, skin or blood, and they're genetically tweaking those cells to revert them to a stem cell-like state. Then they're coaxing those cells forward to become retina, photoreceptors, RPE cells. We call this approach induced pluripotent stem cells. And in the future, you're going to see more and more stem cell therapies using this approach. We fund David Gamm at the University of Wisconsin for this approach. He has a company, a startup company called Opsis. They're working toward a clinical trial using this approach. So I'm going to talk about a few stem cell trials. And you can use stem cells basically in two different ways to treat the retina. One I call the protective approach or the preservation approach. More technically, we call it neuroprotection. And this is using a stem cell that is almost developed into a photoreceptor to try to save a recipient's existing retinal cells. So again, that's the preservation paradigm. And there's a company in the US called J-Site, which a few years ago launched a clinical trial of this approach using its retinal progenitors to try to save vision. So this is going to apply to people who still have vision remaining and are just trying to preserve what they have. So these cells are injected into the vitreous in the middle of the eye. They release proteins or growth factors that are designed or are able to keep the retina healthy. So they are actually now in a phase 3 clinical trial, or I'll correct myself. They're moving into a phase 3 clinical trial. They had excellent results in their phase 1/2, in their phase 2B. The treated eyes performed better than the untreated eye. So they're now moving into phase 3. And they've received some funding now from Santen, a big global pharmaceutical company, to help them move it through that later stage clinical trial. So let's move into the next slide. So another approach using a very similar cell type is being advanced by a company called Retinal out of the UK. And they have a trial underway at Mass Eye and Ear in Boston and a clinic in Phoenix. But instead of trying to preserve cells, the idea here is to replace lost photoreceptors, to restore vision. And instead of injecting these into the vitreous, these cells are injected subretinally underneath the retina. And the hope here is that these cells will actually connect with the patient's existing retina and restore vision. In their phase 2 trial thus far, many of the patients have had about 3 lines of vision restoration at 12 months, and now they're seeing that vision improvement has been durable out to 18 months. So they're expanding their phase 2 right now, trying to get more data with the hope that they can move into phase 3. The Foundation Fighting Blindness US provided some significant funding to get this trial off the ground, and we also fund that smiling gentleman on the right, Jason Commander. So for those of you with age-related macular degeneration, dry AMD or wet AMD, there's another stem cell approach that's targeting RPE cells, which provide support for photoreceptors. And in AMD, it's those RPE cells that degenerate first. So researchers are trying to replace those lost RPE cells. And there are actually a number of trials underway throughout the US and Europe to do just that. One of the trials is out of Southern California called, it's being launched by a company called Regenerative Patch Technologies. They are putting these RPE cells derived from stem cells on a scaffold, and they're transplanting it into the retina. That's what you can see sort of in this image of the retina on the right. And the hope is by putting in new RPE cells, you'll save photoreceptors. At University College London, they're using a similar approach. And again, there are other companies and labs targeting RPE cells for people with age-related macular degeneration. And I will note this approach may also apply to people with Stargardt disease. Next slide. So some other investments that are being made by the Foundation Fighting Blindness for some cross-cutting approaches include an anti-oxidative therapy targeting RP and other retinal conditions, potentially AMD as well. So this company is called Nacuity. In lab studies, we've learned that oxidative stress plays a key role in accelerating vision loss. So if you can mitigate oxidative stress, you have an opportunity to slow vision loss. Nacuity's oral molecule, their anti-oxidative therapy, is moved into a clinical trial in Australia for people with Usher syndrome. But hopefully, if the results from there are encouraging, they will launch a trial in the US for people with RP and Usher syndrome in 2021 as well. What's nice about this approach, it's designed to work independent of the mutated gene causing the disease. Now, another approach that we're providing funding for is being developed out of France, a company called Sparing Vision. And for those of you with RP, you know that your rods are affected first. Rods give you night vision and peripheral vision. And in advanced disease, after you lose rods, your cones start degenerating. And what the researchers in France learned is that there's a protein called rod-derived cone viability factor that's produced by rods that help cones stay healthy. That helps the cones stay healthy. So they've developed a therapy that produces this protein in an effort to preserve cones. So this will hopefully move into a clinical trial in 2021. And again, it's designed to work independent of the mutated gene causing someone's retinal disease. They'll be targeting RP and likely Usher syndrome, at least at some point, because as we know, Usher syndrome is RP with hearing loss. So again, hopefully we'll see a clinical trial in 2021 for this. That's the plan. Next slide. So I wanted to just briefly cover a lot of activity that's going on for Stargardt disease. And I'm not going to get into all the details of the 4 projects that I have mentioned here for the sake of time. But what I want people to understand is Stargardt disease is a condition caused by vitamin A processing. We all need vitamin A to see. We get it through our diets, and vitamin A is the magical molecule that makes our retinas light sensitive. You can think of it as like a fuel. But like a fuel, when it's processed, there are waste products that are produced. Now, in a normal healthy retina, those waste products are cleared properly. But in people with Stargardt disease, those waste products are not cleared. And when they accumulate in the retina, they lead to central vision loss. So what these companies are doing, Alkeus, Acusella, Iveric, B-Light, and there are other companies moving into this space, they're designing therapies to reduce the accumulation of those waste products. So the companies I have listed here are at various phases of clinical trials. You're going to see more companies moving into this space. And this approach may also work for people with dry AMD. We're still at a relatively early stage for many of these companies, but stay tuned. And so finally, last slide. So I'd like to do a little shameless self-promotion, but just to give you a little background on me before I talk about my book here, is I've been in this space now for almost 16 years. And throughout my time in working with patients and families, I've always been inspired by the kids who deal with these conditions with such courage and enthusiasm. The kids are amazing. So while I often write about the research underway, I also wanted to take the opportunity to write a fictional story to honor these kids who take on retinal diseases so heroically. So I came up with this book, Retina Boy. It's published by Apprentice House out of Loyola, Maryland, in the US. And it's a story about a kid that's born blind. He's in Iowa. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a spoiler here. It turns out he's an alien from another planet of blind inhabitants who don't have retinas. And so you follow this boy and his human counterpart throughout the story. And eventually this kid, who's called Retina Boy, is called upon to save the Earth and this other planet. So it's a fun story. It's a story that's geared toward young adults, but I would encourage adults, grown-up adults, to enjoy it too. It's really fun for all ages. And I still have many free codes for Audible in the UK. I've used up all my US free codes. So if anybody is interested in a free Audible copy, send me an email, bshaberman@fightingblindness.org, and I will send you a free code. So I know we've gone a little bit over my time. Hopefully we still have a little bit of time for questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ben. That was really, really good. And I would also endorse the book. I read it and I really, really enjoyed it. Anyone who is a music fan, they too will gain a lot from it. There's even a band in it called the Rhodopsins. So I would encourage people to check out that book. So we have a little time, maybe 1 or 2 minutes for questions. So Ben, one question that has come in is around the USH2A preclinical work that was mentioned, possibly the ProQR work. Is this work, this kind of approach, is it going to benefit both the vestibular and hearing element of Usher's, or is it just focusing on the visual aspects of Usher syndrome?
That's a great question. And right now, this work is all targeting the retina. So it's targeting vision.
Yeah. And then, yeah. And you also mentioned the RDCVF approach. How is that delivered? Is that an oral drug? Is that a gene therapy, like delivered like a gene therapy? How is that delivered?
It is a gene therapy.
It's a gene therapy.
It is a gene therapy, but it's not replacing anything or augmenting anything. It's simply a way to produce that protein in the cells. It kind of it empowers your cells to make that protein.
And we're all about empowerment, so if we can, exactly. And the work that you described on optogenetics, that truly is an exciting field, and we're so delighted and honoured that Professor John Flannery at the University of Berkeley sits on our medical and scientific advisory board, and I know he's a great contributor towards Foundation Fighting Blindness US as well. So there's huge talent out there and researchers dedicated to the cause. One of the things that we've noticed is a lot of the work described seems to be very much, with the exception of optogenetics, gene specific. And we know that, you know, maybe 40% of cases or individuals will not receive a genetic diagnosis because the genetic cause has not yet been identified. What kind of work is ongoing to try and find these new genes that we don't yet know?
That's a great question. So one thing to keep in mind is that, yes, we need to find new genes, but genes can be mutated in ways that are hard for genetic testing to find. So your gene may be common, but it may be mutated in a way that's difficult for genetic testing to pick up. So we're actually funding a project called the Elusive Genes and Mutations Project, which includes Steve Dager, Radha Ayagari, and Mass Ioneer. We're investing about $2.5 million in that project to find those elusive genes and mutations. And that work also is occurring in other labs around the world. You look at places like Nijmegen in the Netherlands, Institut de la Vision in France, and every year we get better and better at identifying the mutated genes. Right now, in most cases, or I should say collectively, we can identify the mutated gene in about 2/3 of the cases. But one last little comment, many of the therapies I talked about today, the stem cells, acuity, sparing vision, those are all designed to work independent of the mutated gene.
Exactly, and as you say, there's a lot of work going on. We ourselves are funding very similar to what your Elusive project is, and it's a discovery arm of Target 5000, and that's a collaboration between Trinity College Dublin and the group in Nijmegen in the Netherlands. And it's really important that we continue searching for those unknown causes of retinal degenerations.
Definitely.
Just one final question, and you know, it's geared around your book. Can I just ask if the audio version is available via audible.com app? Do you know, or will we follow up separately?
It is an Audible book. That's the only way it's available. So again, if you want to buy it, I'm not going to stop anybody from purchasing it on Audible in the UK, but I'm also happy to give you a free promo code so you can get a free version of it as well.
Brilliant. Look, thank you so much, Ben, for joining us today. And again, unfortunately, we don't have as much time as we would love to give to this aspect, but be reassured that we are coming back to you very soon, early next year, with a whole suite of condition-specific webinars where we will look at the research and clinical trials and support for each of those. So thank you very much, Ben. Hopefully we can bring you back to Dublin. And
I would love to come back.
Yeah. And Howth is beautiful. Howth is definitely beautiful.
It really is. All of Dublin is beautiful.
It's very quiet at the moment, so we'll wait until things improve.
Okay.
So thank you, Ben.
Everybody. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so moving on, I'm going to bring back our CEO of Fighting Blindness, Kevin Whelan, and we're going to talk a little bit now on, we've heard so much around the research that's taking place, the clinical trials that are ongoing, but the journey doesn't stop there. The journey stops, as our chairman, Brendan Buckley, put yesterday to the scientific audience. The journey only really stops when access is given to people living with sight loss, that when these drugs become available in the real world. So we want to just share a little bit on the work that we are doing internally and on your behalf to ensure that these drugs and therapies become accessible to everyone. So Kevin, I might just ask you to unmute yourself and share your video.
Good afternoon, everybody, and a big thank you to Ben there for all that exciting news. One of the things that struck me when we were listening to Ben is that the exciting news and the potential that that exciting news brings has to be realized, and the only way it can be realized is by, as Laura said there earlier, access to those treatments and those therapies when they do become available. One thing that we are all very conscious of is legacy. And I think legacy for fighting blindness has to be very much to the fore today. When we think about the people who would have sat around the table and initially talked about, as people living with RP, and talked about developing an organization that someday would be contributing to a situation where people could look at cure, could look at treatment, and could look at therapies. And how excited those people would be today if they realized that what they did in terms of their seeking funds and investing in research and taking risks had suddenly come to the fruition of, as Ben described there, therapies 80 plus in development, clinical trials 40 underway, and Foundation Fighting Blindness involved in another 40 developments in their portfolio as well. So all of that news is very exciting, and it's tangible, and it's within touching distance. But what we need to do is bridge the gap between the touching distance and us actually grasping that opportunity and that treatment. So, as with every journey, there are twists and turns. And we certainly, in terms of Luxturna, we have the twist in that the National Centre for Pharmacoeconomics have issued their recommendation to the HSE that they consider not funding the Luxturna treatment unless value for money can be improved. We ourselves, as an organisation, as a patient advocacy organisation, need to do everything possible to demonstrate that the value for money and the benefits to the individual far exceed what the debate is at the moment. As well as that, the fact that this therapy and treatment has been recognised and reimbursed in other jurisdictions has to make us even more determined that equity of access is available here in Ireland. Through our own work, we have developed evidence that demonstrates that there is a significant cost over and above what the state recognises in terms of the lifelong costs and the whole life costs for people living with the various conditions. Thankfully, we had the support of Retina International, and we invested in the IRD Counts survey, which again highlighted and created that evidence that we absolutely can demonstrate that there is an economic benefit apart from the absolute lifelong benefit for people that can access these treatments. From the point of view of the discussions we've had today, and from the very start of our presentations today, we heard Evie and Victoria talk about the need for this to be reimbursed. We also heard then from Ian McKinley and talking about his life experience and the potential they've reached. And Claudette particularly emphasised the importance that everyone has and can play in terms of advocating for a better future for those living with sight loss. And in terms of the group of people that are on this webinar today, I would emphasize that there is a huge role for us to play together to ensure that we draw sufficient attention to this issue, that we make it a very, very high priority agenda issue for health and for the government in general, and that we ensure that we do absolutely everything to influence, and so far as we possibly can, that this be reimbursed in Ireland. Because, as we said earlier, the best progress being made in terms of this treatment is for young children and early intervention. And that early intervention gives the opportunity for children to have and to reach their maximum potential. In terms of legacy, we talk about fighting blindness and the legacy of the original founders. I think what we have now is an opportunity to create another legacy where we can say that we came together, we joined our voices, we rallied and made sure that the children that could benefit from this therapy actually get the therapy here in Ireland. And that for those people and for our legacy of fighting blindness as we currently stand, is that we can say we did everything we possibly could to ensure that the family voice was represented in all of these discussions. And people may be listening now and saying, well, look, you know what? This therapy isn't actually going to be of benefit to myself. But what you have to think about is, as Ben said earlier, about the first approved therapy. It is so important that we get this one across the line because others are following. And if we work hard together and we have a coordinated approach and develop a coordinated campaign and equip people with the right information and to be able to demonstrate the right evidence, then we can work together to ensure that we achieve this. The Board of Fighting Blindness have made a decision that they will invest in increasing our advocacy capacity to bring in additional expertise that will help us develop this campaign. And the campaign meeting that we're having next week will set out the roadmap that we want to follow to try and best influence the outcome of the discussions and the decisions with HSE. And we will then be providing each and every member with the opportunity to become involved in the campaign with us. And what we also need to remember is that within those members and their extended family, there's the opportunity to talk locally in terms of local TDs and make sure that they realize that this is such an important matter for the sight loss community in Ireland. And we need to make sure that they are going back and people are saying, oh, did you have people calling to your constituency office about this? Have you had the letters? Have you had the emails? Have you had the phone calls? Because the more that we can achieve that, the more aware that each and every TD becomes that this is an issue that needs to be addressed, and addressed in a positive frame in terms of the financial support that's required to make this happen. Other things that we need to remember as well in this is that the emotional story and the emotional impact of this is one aspect of how we try and win this argument and this debate. But I think the most important thing on top of that is that we balance that with an evidential submission. And when we did our patient submission for the National Centre for Pharmacoeconomics, we emphasized not only the emotional and the psychological and the developmental impact on people, but we also identified how we can, through this process, create an opportunity for people to contribute to their community, to be a worker in their community, to attend college, to develop a life where they are contributing to the state, to their community, and to the economy. And they are the most important people that we need to talk about and support through this process. We will be in touch with everyone to explain our campaign and to decide how we're going to develop that campaign further. But most importantly, Claudette emphasized how important patient advocacy is. And this is an important juncture in the history of fighting blindness, because we now have what I would describe as the happy problem of trying to get the funding for the therapy. Because in the years gone by, when this charity was established, it was a dream, a vision that this might happen. We now have the reality, and we now need to make sure that our voice is heard and that we absolutely represent the community that we serve, but also that we recognize within that community we have an obligation to look out for each other. And one win in this, in terms of this therapy, could have huge, huge potential and benefit as a precedent for other therapies that are coming forward. So I would encourage everybody to get involved. It is a huge ask for people to tell their personal story, and it's a courageous thing for people to do. But we've heard people today talk about their personal story. We heard Victoria and Evie last year talk about their personal journey. And what I would encourage people to do is that if you do have children impacted by the condition and you are prepared to share your story, we'll support you, we'll handle it as sensitively as possible, and we will encourage through all the members that we achieve what we want to achieve. And that's a legacy of children accessing the first approved therapy and to access it here in Ireland, and for the greater benefit of those other therapies that will come along in the future. So,
thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you. And again, a thank you to everyone who submitted and participated in that lived experiences survey that we launched earlier on this year. it really, really informed our submission to the NCPE. So thank you, each and every one of you, for taking the time out to complete that survey and share your lived experience with us. So Kevin, I'm going to go back to you again, and we're going to move on to the Paddy Byrne Empowerment Award.
Thanks very much, Laura. And again, legacy seems to be the theme here for my contributions at the moment. But Paddy Byrne would have been one of the original members of Fighting Blindness and would have been very active down through the years and was very significant in terms of particularly developing fundraising initiatives that helped fund the research that we were doing. So each year we present an award called the Empowerment Award in memory of Paddy and his family and everything that they did for fighting blindness. And we are delighted this year that we are honouring Christina Fasser with a Lifetime Achievement Award to mark a recent retirement and service as president of Retina International after an amazing 28 years. Christina was diagnosed with RP at an early age, and she has since dedicated her life to focusing attention on the need for scientific research to find a cure or treatment for retinal blindness. And I think going back to my earlier comments about legacy and about campaigning and advocacy, she is a prime example of what can be achieved and the strides that have been made as a result of her leadership and presidency of Retina International. Christina possesses a vast scientific knowledge. She can engage with scientists at every level, and she's highly respected within the retinal research community. She's been a leading influence and driving force in encouraging greater collaboration and connection between patient organizations, scientists, and clinicians in order to ensure the best quality of research is taking place. And that, as I said earlier, can even be evidenced in the IRD count study that we did in partnership with Retina International. And certainly, you know, all our partnerships with Retina International have been positive experiences that have added to the greater good of what we do. Fighting Blindness has known Christina since the earliest days and has benefited from her mentorship and guidance in establishing our work as a patient-led organisation. And she's a very worthy recipient of the award. And I'm very pleased to introduce you to Audrey Dervaloy from Novartis, who are the sponsors and supporters of this Empowerment Award each year at our event. And I'd like to hand you over to Audrey now. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to join this event today, and I would like just to say a few words regarding what you have mentioned, Kevin, just before. I can only echo on your words, and we are very committed at Novartis to join our efforts to make our drugs available for every patient in Ireland. So yes, today at Novartis, of course, we are very delighted to support, this Empowerment Award. I hope you can see the award today, and this award is to recognize someone who has made a big impact on the life of patients living with sight loss. So we are very happy this year to honor Christina Fasser with this Lifetime Achievement Award, and to mark her recent retirement, as you mentioned, as president of Retina International for so many years. So yes, Christina has been a leading, a driving force in encouraging, collaboration between all different stakeholders, organizations, clinicians, researchers, to ensure the best quality of research. So at Novartis today, we are very delighted to present this award in recognition of Christina's strong commitment. So I would like to hand over to you, Christina. Again, big congratulations, and if you would like to say a few words regarding, your feeling to getting this award today.
Thank you very much, Audrey, for this wonderful award. Thank you very much, Kevin, and all the people of Fighting Blindness. it is my privilege and great honor to accept this award. This award is very special to me. It takes the name of Paddy Byrne. I had the privilege to meet him the first time in '88. You remember? That's a long time ago. He started just out to get engaged, and he moved forward with a lot of humanity, warmth, but dedication to find a solution to run Fighting Blindness. Fighting Blindness has become a wonderful institution, and I admire what you're doing, and it's really, you push things to the edge. You are the organization and all the people behind it. And there is the need of many, many, and also the support of the sponsors, the pharma industry, to help things to become a reality. I think we are proud. You're a remarkable example for everybody what a small country, a small population can achieve. And for this, everybody has to help. I think the struggle that we have at the moment to get the first gene therapy reimbursed and paid for the patients, that's a nice new struggle. But we have to fight it because we have the right to see. And I think we have to stipulate it. And when I was thinking about legacy, I was thinking about the many people that helped during my course of work, and without them, nothing would have been possible. It was, as Claudette already mentioned, it was Gordon Gund, Claudette, Michael Griffiths, and many, many others. We called us already 20 years ago the RP dinosaurs. And I think we, the dinosaurs, we just get a new thing to do. Because many of us, we got blind. We had to go the full way from being visually impaired or even fully sighted to be severely visually impaired and in the end to go blind. And I think our testimony to tell what's the difference of a person with a visual field of 5 degrees, visual acuity of 0.5, with that, I had a normal life, a normal professional life. I could do whatever I wanted with the exception of driving. When it started to be more difficult, things became more difficult, but it was still pretty easy. It started to get very difficult when I couldn't see anymore any letters in high contrast. So when I would see only light and dark. But today, where I don't have light perception, I know the huge difference it makes. And I think we have really to tell everybody what we learned the hard way and what we would like that the young people with RP65 don't have to live through, that they have and can keep what they have now, and stabilization. And we know that from the cost of illness study. Not having to bother if it's going worse improves our well-keeping, well-being, and being part of life. And this, I wish everybody, and thank you once again for this wonderful award, this wonderful statue. It's really beautiful, tactile, and it's now in my living room. I wish you all stay safe. May God bless you.
Thank you, Christina, for that. And it's our pleasure, really, to present this award to you. You've been a true friend, supporter. You've definitely made us work that little bit harder here, which is very good. So thank you. It's, again, unfortunately, we would love to give this to you in person, and hopefully we can meet again very, very soon and do that and celebrate, because really you have been a shining light for all of us, and have ensured that we kept our focus. So thank you, and thank you for joining us. Kevin, I might just go to you next.
Thanks very much, Laura. I just want to close today's meeting by particularly thanking everyone for attending, and also attending in the circumstances that we wouldn't normally enjoy. But I do think it's been a great achievement that we've been able to maintain the succession of Retina meetings again this year, in spite of all the challenges. And maybe that's something we should take from this, is that in spite of the challenges of the pandemic, we've risen above that and we have held our conference, and it's been an amazing success. And we've had quite a number of people engaged over the 2 days, I would say in excess of 700 people. So we've risen above that challenge. And going back to my earlier point, I think together we can rise above the next challenge. And the next challenge being that we get reimbursement, as Christina has said, because the right to sight is valid for everybody. And I think we take that away from today's meeting. Particularly thank all our speakers and contributors, because they gave a sense of hope and a sense of resilience around challenges that they've had in their lives. And we particularly thank our sponsors as well, and we thank the contribution from Novartis in presenting the award, and Audrey for taking the time to be with us. And I think we particularly thank Christina for being the person that she has been, for sticking with the journey for as long as she has, and for inspiring us to continue that journey to make sure that the rights of people are protected and that the rights of people are realised, and that we do it as a community who support each other through each and every stage of that journey. So we thank you all today, and thank you so much for making Retina 2020 happen and be such a success. Stay healthy, stay safe, follow David's advice that he gave earlier, and we'll see you, please God, the other side of this. Thank you.